Hello guys, welcome to Ben 10 What Ifs. So in this video, we will see, what if Ben 10 discovered sacred gear Omnitrix Ben 10x Gwen x Akeno Himejima. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Blank, blank, underscore, blank. Chapter 1. Convergence of Powers. The neon glow of Tokyo's Shibuya district painted Ben Tennyson's face in alternating hues of electric blue and vibrant pink. 22 years old and 7 years removed from when he first found the Omnitrix, Ben stood on the rooftop of a skyscraper, the midnight breeze ruffling his brown hair. The city sprawled beneath him like a circuit board come to life. Its patterns both familiar and alien to his American sensibilities. Magister Tennyson. Energy readings still indicate anomalous activity within a 3-block radius. Rook Blanco's voice crackled through his plumber badge. I cannot pinpoint the exact location. Ben tapped the badge affixed to his jacket. Copy that. I'll sweep the area again. Whatever's cow. Sing these dimensional hiccups isn't showing up on any standard scanners. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing the sleek black and green Omnitrix that had become as much a part of him as his own heartbeat. The device had evolved with him over the years, growing more sophisticated as he matured. No longer the gangly teenager who treated heroism like a video game, Ben had earned his position as one of Earth's premier defenders. His green jacket, now reinforced with lightweight alien tech, bore the insignia of the Plumbers, Special Response Division, an elite unit tasked with handling the most unusual threats. The Omnitrix hummed against his skin, almost as if responding to something in the atmosphere. Ben frowned, studying the normally steady green glow that now pulsed with an irregular rhythm. That's new, he muttered, tapping the faceplate cautiously. The Omnitrix had never reacted to environmental conditions before, at least not like this. Its behavior reminded him of a compass needle straining toward magnetic north. A ripple in the air above a nearby building caught his attention. The space seemed to fold inward, colors inverting briefly before snapping back to normal. In that brief distortion, Ben glimpsed something, a landscape of crimson skies and floating islands that certainly wasn't Tokyo or any alien world he recognized. Rook, I've got visual on some kind of spatial anomaly. Sending coordinates now. Received. Magister Tennyson, approach with caution. These readings do not match any known alien technology or dimensional transit signatures. Ben's lips quirked into a half-smile. When has approach with caution ever been my style? He twisted the Omnitrix dial, cycling through silhouettes until he found what he needed. Going XLR8 to get a closer look. The familiar sensation of transformation washed over him. Cells restructuring, bones elongating, consciousness expanding into a form not his own yet somehow still familiar. In a flash of emerald light, he became the Kinesolaran, a blue-skinned reptilian speedster with an aerodynamic helmet and wheels for feet. Still gets the heart racing, XLR8 said, voice deeper and raspier than Ben's human tone. With practiced ease, he leapt from the rooftop, accelerating midair to race down the side of the skyscraper. The world blurred around him, Tokyo's lights streaking into continuous lines as he reached velocities approaching the sound barrier. In 15 seconds, he'd crossed the distance to the anomaly, skidding to a halt on the rooftop where he'd seen the distortion. Up close, the air shimmered like heat waves over asphalt, but with an unnatural iridescence that reminded Ben of oil on water. XLR8's visor slid up, revealing his large, reptilian eyes. Rook, I'm at the site. There's definitely something. The distortion expanded suddenly, rippling outward like a stone thrown into a pond. XLR8 attempted to dodge, but the wave of energy moved faster than even his Kinesolaran reflexes could react. The distortion passed through him, sending jolts of electricity through his transformed body. The Omnitrix symbol on his chest flashed erratically, shifting from green to purple momentarily before discharging a pulse of energy that knocked XLR8 backward. He tumbled across the rooftop, the transformation dissolving in a flash of light that returned him to human form. Tennyson to Rook, Ben groaned, pushing himself up on his elbows. Something's wrong with the Omnitrix. It just. A deafening crack split the air as the spatial distortion expanded dramatically, tearing open like a wound in reality. Through the tear, Ben glimpsed that same crimson landscape, but now something was emerging, a writhing mass of darkness peppered with glowing eyes of various sizes. The creature moved with a sickening fluidity, its form constantly shifting and pulsating. "Oh man," Ben muttered, scrambling to his feet. "That's definitely not in the Omnitrix database." The entity pulled itself fully into their dimension, hovering above the rooftop. It expanded, forming a vaguely humanoid upper body with multiple arms, while its lower half remained an amorphous cloud of darkness. Its central eyes, three arranged in a triangle, fixed on Ben with predatory focus. "Life form detected," it rasped in a voice like grinding glass. "Sacred gear energy signature identified. Harvesting protocol initiated." Ben's combat instincts took over. He rolled sideways as one of the entity's arms extended with impossible speed, smashing into the concrete where he'd stood moments before. The Omnitrix still pulsed with that strange rhythm. But Ben had fought with malfunctioning equipment before. "If you're looking for a sacred gear, whatever that is, you've got the wrong guy," Ben called out, twisting the Omnitrix dial. "But I'm happy to introduce you to some friends of mine." He slammed down on the dial, expecting the familiar rush of transformation. Instead, the Omnitrix sparked with purple energy that traveled up his arm. Ben gasped as unknown power coursed through his veins, different from any transformation he'd experienced before. The change still came, but it felt augmented, as if the Omnitrix was drawing from two power sources simultaneously. When the emerald light faded, Ben had become Heatblast, but not quite the Heatblast he knew. The Pyronite's magma-like body still burned with intense heat, but now purple flame mixed with the orange and yellow. Crystalline structures protruded from his shoulders and forearms, and when he raised his hands instinctively, he found he could form not just fireballs but concentrated beams of heat that cut through the air with laser precision. "Whoa," Heatblast said, examining his modified form. "This is new." The entity recoiled slightly. "Impossible. Human host WITH sacred gear integration and alien DNA manifestation. Unknown variable detected." "Yeah, I get that a lot," Heatblast replied, gathering energy between his palms. The heat built to unprecedented levels. The purple flames dancing between his fingers with intelligence almost separate from his own will. "Now how about you crawl back to whatever dimension you came from before I really test out these upgrades?" The entity's response was to launch multiple tendrils of darkness toward him. Heatblast thrust his hands forward, releasing not just a stream of fire but a concentrated blast of purple NGED flame that spiraled around itself like a drill. The attack tore through the entity's extensions, causing it to emit a high-pitched shriek. "Sacred gear. Destruction element detected," it hissed, retreating slightly. Reassessing threat level, Heatblast advanced, the temperature around him rising so dramatically that the rooftop beneath his feet began to soften. "Whatever you're scanning for, it's not worth tangling with me to get it." The dimensional rift behind the entity pulsed, and it began to retreat toward it. "Subject will be reported. Harvesting postponed." "Oh no you don't." Heatblast lunged forward, unleashing another blast of concentrated flame. "You don't get to crash into my dimension and just leave." The attack struck true, burning through the entity's amorphous body. It shrieked again, more in rage than pain, and suddenly expanded outward in all directions. A wave of darkness engulfed Heatblast, smothering his flames momentarily. Within that darkness, Ben felt something probing at him, not physically, but energetically, as if scanning the Omnitrix itself. "Prototype located," the entity's voice echoed from all around him. "Data extracted. Primary mission accomplished." With a surge of will, Heatblast intensified his core temperature to levels he'd never attempted before. The purple flames erupted from his body in a nova-like explosion, burning away the darkness. But when the flames cleared, both the entity and the dimensional rift had vanished, leaving only scorched concrete and the lingering scent of ozone. The Omnitrix symbol on Heatblast's chest pulsed once more before timing out. Reverting Ben to human form, he staggered, feeling uncharacteristically drained, as if the transformation had demanded more energy than usual. "Tennyson to Rook," he said into his badge, voice slightly hoarse. Target retreated through some kind of dimensional portal. "The Omnitrix is acting strange. The transformation was different." "Different how, Magister Tennyson?" Rook's concerned voice replied. Before Ben could answer, a new voice spoke from behind him. Because it's absorbed sacred gear energy, something it was never designed to do. Ben whirled around, instinctively dropping into a fighting stance. Standing at the edge of the rooftop was a young woman with long black hair tied in a ponytail that reached down to her legs. Her violet eyes seemed to glow subtly in the darkness. And she wore what appeared to be a Japanese school uniform, though one from a private academy Ben didn't recognize. Most striking was the air of power that surrounded her, not threatening, but unmistakably present. Like standing near a high-voltage transformer. And behind her, nearly transparent in the moonlight, Ben could swear he glimpsed the outline of wings. "Who are you?" Ben demanded, hand hovering over the Omnitrix despite its apparent malfunction. "And how do you know about the Omnitrix?" The woman smiled, an expression both friendly and enigmatic. "My name is Akeno Himejima. And I don't know about your Omnitrix, specifically, but I know sacred gear energy when I see it." She gestured to his wrist. "Whatever that device is, it's just absorbed power from another world." "My world." Ben's eyes narrowed. "You're not human." Akeno's smile widened. "Not entirely, no. Just as you weren't entirely human when you were wrapped in those fascinating purple flames." She stepped closer, moving with a grace that seemed almost supernatural. "That creature you fought is called a Void Harvester. They're drawn to powerful supernatural objects, like what your device has now become." "Magister Tennyson." Rook's voice came through the badge. "Do you require backup?" Ben held Akeno's gaze for a long moment before responding. "Negative, Rook. I've made contact with a local expert. Continue monitoring for additional anomalies." "Understood. Be careful." Akeno arched an eyebrow. "Magister. That sounds important." "It's just a title," Ben said dismissively, though years of experience had taught him to be cautious with information. "You mentioned sacred gear energy. What exactly is that, and why would that thing, the Void Harvester, want it?" Akeno glanced at the scorched rooftop where the dimensional rift had been. "This isn't the best place to discuss such matters. There could be more of them." "I've handled worse," Ben replied flatly. "I'm sure you have," Akeno said, amusement dancing in her eyes. "But wouldn't you prefer not to fight on an empty stomach? There's an excellent ramen shop still open a few blocks from here. I promise to answer your question. And perhaps you'll answer some of mine." Ben hesitated. Plumber protocol dictated caution when dealing with unknown extraterrestrial or extradimensional entities. But years of hero work had also taught him that sometimes the best intelligence came from unorthodox sources. Besides, the Omnitrix was behaving erratically. Getting information before facing another threat seemed prudent. "Lead the way," he finally said. "But just so we're clear, if this is some kind of trap, you should know that I've taken down beings that could tear planets apart." Akeno laughed lightly, the sound surprisingly musical. "How fascinating. I look forward to hearing those stories." As she turned to lead him toward the roof access door, she added over her shoulder, "And for what it's worth, Magister Tennyson, if I wanted to trap you, I wouldn't use ramen as bait. I'm much more creative than that." Ben found himself fighting back a smile despite the circumstances. Whatever, Akeno Himejima was, she certai. NLY wasn't like most of the aliens or extradimensional beings he typically encountered. That made her either less dangerous or considerably more so. The ramen shop was tucked away on a narrow side street, its weathered wooden storefront illuminated by a single lantern. Inside, the space was warm and intimate, just 6 counter seats and the cheerful elderly proprietor who nodded to Akeno with familiar recognition. The rich aroma of pork broth, garlic, and green onions filled the air, momentarily distracting Ben from the strangeness of the evening. "Irashai," the old man called out, his weathered face creasing in a smile. He exchanged brief pleasantries with Akeno in Japanese before she and Ben took seats at the far end of the counter. "I ordered you tonkatsu ramen," Akeno said. "Unless you have objections." "Food is food," Ben replied with a shrug that belied his growing appetite. 7 years of galactic travel had expanded his culinary horizons considerably. While they waited, Ben studied Akeno more carefully. In the warm lighting of the shop, she appeared more human, though no less striking. Her composure reminded him of Gwen, though there was a playfulness in her eyes that his cousin rarely displayed. "So," Ben began quietly, Sacred gear energy. What is it, and why did it affect the Omnitrix? Akeno folded her hands on the counter. Sacred gears are powerful artifacts created by the biblical god, yes, that god. She added, noting Ben's skeptical expression. They're tools with various abilities, typically bound to human souls. Some can summon weapons, others manipulate elements, create healing miracles, or even house powerful beings. You're talking about magic, Ben said flatly. Actual, religious magic. Is that really so hard to believe for someone who can transform into different species at will? Akeno countered, nodding toward the Omnitrix. Your world has its science and technology. Mine has supernatural powers rooted in faith, magical bloodlines, and ancient pacts. Different paths to similar outcomes. Their conversation paused as two steaming bowls arrived. Ben had to admit the ramen looked incredible. Rich broth with thin noodles, topped with chashu pork, a soft-boiled egg, bamboo shoots, and green onions. Itadakimasu, Akeno said softly before taking up her chopsticks with practiced elegance. Ben awkwardly manipulated his own chopsticks. Despite extensive space travel, certain Earth customs from cultures not his own still eluded him. So these sacred gears, they're usually bound to humans. Then why would one bind to the Omnitrix? Akeno thou. GHT fully chewed a piece of pork before answering. It didn't exactly bind to your device. From what I observed, your Omnitrix absorbed the energy when that dimensional rift opened. Sacred gear energy seeking a compatible vessel. Normally impossible, but your device seems exceptionally adaptive. It's designed to absorb and recombine DNA, Ben explained, finally managing to capture some noodles. But energy patterns are a different story. Perhaps not as different as you think, Akeno suggested. The boundaries between biological information, energy, and soul essence aren't as distinct as most scientists believe. That's why magical bloodlines exist. Supernatural power encoded in hereditary patterns. Ben considered this as he tasted the ramen. It was delicious, rich and complex in a way that chain restaurant versions back home never achieved. So what happens now? Is this temporary, or is the Omnitrix permanently affected? Akeno's expression became more serious. That depends on several factors, including what kind of sacred gear energy it absorbed. The purple flames you manifested suggest a destruction element, possibly related to fallen angel powers. She paused, studying him with renewed interest. Which is rather curious, given my own heritage. Your heritage? Ben prompted. A flicker of something, caution, perhaps, crossed Akeno's face before she smiled again. Let's Jew. Saints say I understand destructive power quite intimately. But to answer your question, no, I don't believe this is temporary. The Void Harvester seemed to confirm that the integration is stable, which is why it retreated after gathering whatever data it sought. That's what worries me, Ben said, setting down his chopsticks. It said, primary mission accomplished, after scanning the Omnitrix. Like the fight was just a bonus objective. Void Harvesters are collectors and catalogers, Akeno explained. They gather information about powerful artifacts for their masters. Her voice lowered. If one appeared here, in this dimension, someone sent it specifically for your Omnitrix. Story of my life, Ben muttered. Ever since I was 10, someone's always trying to steal this thing. Akeno raised an eyebrow. You've carried that power since you were 10 years old. Found it on a camping trip, Ben said with a half smile. Thought it was a watch that fell from the sky. Turned out to be the most powerful device in the galaxy. Created by a hyper-intelligent alien named Azimuth. How fascinatingly parallel, Akeno mused. Sacred gears often find their way to children or teenagers, usually at moments of crisis or need. She studied him thoughtfully. You've had years to master your abilities. That explains your composure when facing the Harvester. Ben shrugged, though not dismissively. Quote, you fight enough planet-conquering aliens, you develop a certain perspective. And here I thought devil politics was complicated, Akeno said with a soft laugh. Devil politics. Ben's eyes narrowed. You're saying actual devils exist in your world. Akeno's smile turned mysterious. My world, as you call it, exists alongside your own, separated by veils of perception and dimensional boundaries. What humans in your world relegated to mythology and religion continues to exist in parallel realities. Devils, angels, Fallen angels, gods from various pantheons, all real, all with their own societies and conflicts. And you're part of this world, Ben stated rather than asked. Which faction? Akeno seemed impressed by his directness. Perceptive. I was born of a human mother and a fallen angel father. Though my current allegiances are more complicated. She pulled aside her collar slightly, revealing what appeared to be a small, ornate tattoo. I serve in the household of a devil heiress now. Ben absorbed this information, mentally cataloging it alongside the countless alien cultures and civilizations he'd encountered. Strange as it sounded, it wasn't fundamentally different from earning that Tetramans had a warrior culture or that Galvans valued intellectual achievement above all else. Just another type of society with its own rules and hierarchies. So devils, angels, and his sacred gears all exist in a parallel dimension, Ben summarized. And now something from your world has affected the Omnitrix, which has attracted attention from beings like that Void Harvester. Precisely, Akeno nodded. The question is, who sent the Harvester, and what do they intend to do with the information they gathered? Before Ben could respond, his plumber badge chimed with an urgent tone. He tapped it, activating the communication channel. Tennyson. Ben. Gwen's voice came through, tense and rushed. Where are you? Something's happening at Tokyo Tower, some kind of energy CG nature unlike anything I've seen before. It's not anodite energy, not standard magic, not even alien tech. Ben met Akeno's eyes across the counter. Let me guess. It feels supernatural, possibly related to religious mythology. A pause. How did you? Never mind. Kevin and I are en route, ETA 8 minutes. I'm closer. I'll check it out, Ben replied. And Gwen, I'm bringing someone with expertise in this area. Since when do you have supernatural contacts in Tokyo? Gwen asked, skepticism evident. Since about an hour ago. Tennyson out. He closed the channel and looked to Akeno. I'm guessing that's not a coincidence. Akeno was already standing, leaving payment on the counter. The Harvester's appearance may have weakened the dimensional barriers further. If more breaches are forming. Her expression grew serious. We should hurry. Outside, Ben reached for the Omnitrix, then hesitated. Not sure how this sacred gear energy will affect my transformations. There's only one way to find out, Akeno replied. Then, with a subtle shift in her posture, dark feathered wings materialized from her back, extending to an impressive wingspan. Unless you'd prefer a lift. Ben couldn't help but stare momentarily. Not at the wings themselves, he'd seen stranger biological adaptations, but at the casual confidence with which she revealed them in a public street. Don't worry, she said, noting his concern. Normal humans can't perceive my wings unless I allow it. That's convenient, Ben admitted, then refocused on the Omnitrix. But I think I'd better test this out now, before we're in the middle of a fight. He twisted the dial, cycling through his available transformations until he found one that might be useful for rapid transit. Let's try Big Chill. He slammed down the dial, and emerald light engulfed him. The transformation felt different again, the usual sensation of his body changing overlaid with something that felt like electricity coursing through his nervous system. When the light faded, he had indeed become the Necrophrygian, a moth-like alien with blue skin and large wings, but with noticeable modifications. Big Chill's normally blue coloration now had patterns of purple energy flowing through it like circuits. His wings, typically translucent, now shimmered with an ethereal quality that seemed to bend light around them. Most notably, the temperature around him dropped far more dramatically than usual, frost forming on the pavement in a rapidly expanding circle. Interesting, he said, his voice still carrying the characteristic raspy whisper of Big Chill, but with a subtle echo. The integration seems to amplify my alien's natural abilities. Akeno hovered a few feet above the ground, her wings beating slowly. Ice and freezing, a powerful combination with destruction energy. She gestured toward Tokyo Tower, visible in the distance. Shall we? Big Chill nodded, spreading his modified wings. With a powerful downstroke, he took to the air, discovering immediately that his flight was considerably faster than before. The cityscape blurred beneath him as he accelerated to speeds that should have been impossible for his Necrophrygian form. Akeno kept pace surprisingly well, her wings carrying her with a grace that suggested years of aerial experience. They soared above Tokyo's nighttime glow, two beings of power traversing the sky unseen by the millions below. You mentioned devil politics earlier, Big Chill said as they flew. Is that likely to be related to what's happening? Possibly, Akeno replied, voice carrying clearly despite the rush of wind. Devils, angels, and fallen angels have maintained an uneasy peace for centuries. But there are factions in each group who would love to acquire new power sources, especially O. Nay, as versatile as your Omnitrix appears to be. Great, Big Chill muttered. Just what I needed. Supernatural politics on top of interstellar ones. Tokyo Tower grew larger in their vision, its red lattice structure illuminated against the night sky. As they approached, Big Chill could see that something was indeed wrong. Surrounding the tower's observation deck was a swirling vortex of RKNESS similar to what he'd seen with the Void Harvester, but much larger. That's not good, he commented unnecessarily. No, Akeno agreed, her expression grim. That's a full-dimensional rift forming. If it stabilizes, anything could come through. They landed on the observation deck, which had thankfully been evacuated, likely as soon as the anomaly began forming. The rift pulsed with dark energy, occasionally discharging arcs of purple lightning that scorched the metal structure. Any ideas how to close it? Big Chill asked, assessing the situation. Akeno raised her hands, electricity crack. Cling between her fingers. Not standard electricity, Ben noted, but yellow-tinged lightning with an almost holy quality to it. Normally, this would require a complex ritual or a specialized sacred gear. But with your device absorbing sacred gear energy. She was interrupted as the rift expanded suddenly, the dark energy swirling faster. From within the vortex emerged three figures, humanoid but clearly not human. They had pale skin, pointed ears, and eyes that glowed with malevolence. All three wore ornate armor that seemed to be a blend of medieval design and something more otherworldly. Devil Reconnaissance Squad, Akeno said quietly. Militant faction, based on those insignias. The lead figure stepped forward, surveying the observation deck with obvious disdain. His eyes fixed first on Akeno, narrowing in recognition. Then shifted to Big Chill with obvious interest. A fallen angel hybrid and something new, he said, voice carrying an aristocratic inflection. How fortunate. Oh, intelligence was correct about the sacred gear anomaly. You're trespassing in a protected dimension, Big Chill said, straightening to his full height. Whatever you're looking for, you won't find it here. The devil laughed, a sound utterly devoid of humor. On the contrary, we've found exactly what we're looking for. He pointed directly at Big Chill. The sacred gear that adapts and evolves. The 1-hour seers have glimpsed merging with technology beyond our realm. With such power, House Valifor will rise above all other devil houses. Akeno stepped forward, electricity intensifying around her hands. You're violating the non-interference accords, Valifor. The three factions will not stand for this incursion. The three factions will soon be reorganized under new leadership, the devil replied dismissively. He gestured to his companions. Secure the hybrid creature. Kill the fallen angel's daughter if she interferes. The two subordinate devils moved with supernatural speed, wing weapons that glowed with malevolent energy. Big Chill reacted instinctively, exhaling a blast of freezing air that was noticeably more powerful than his usual ability. The breath weapon didn't create ice. It crystallized the very air, forming jagged structures that trapped one of the attacking devils mid-leap. The second attacker evaded, closing on Akeno with a serrated sword raised high. She responded with frightening efficiency, her lightning coalescing into a spear of pure electrical energy that she thrust forward in one fluid motion. The devil barely dodged, the spear grazing his armor and leaving a scorched furrow. You've improved since our last encounter, Priestess of Thunder, he hissed, circling warily. And you're still underestimating your opponents, Malphas, Akeno replied, lightning dancing between her fingertips. The lead devil, Valifor, raised his hand, dark energy gathering in his palm. Enough games. The sacred gear will be ours. He launched a concentrated beam of darkness toward Big Chill, who instinctively turned intangible, one of the Necrophrygian's natural abilities. To his surprise, the beam still affected him, striking the Omnitrix symbol on his chest. And sending painful energy coursing through his intangible form. Your physical form may become insubstantial, Valifor said with a cruel smile, but soul energy affects all states of matter. Big Chill solidified, staggering backward. The Omnitrix symbol on his chest flickered erratically, cycling between green and purple. For a moment, Ben feared it might time out, leaving him vulnerable in human form. Instead, something unexpected happened. The Omnitrix spoke, using Azimuth's voice. Unknown energy pattern detected. Initiating adaptive protocols. A pulse of green energy erupted from the symbol, pushing back Valifor's attack. Big Chill felt a surge of new power, not just the amplification of his necrophrygian abilities but something fundamentally different. The purple energy patterns on his body intensified, and he instinctively knew he could do more than just exhale ice. "Let's see how you handle this," Big Chill said, raising his hands. The temperature around him plummeted dramatically, frost spreading across the observation deck in seconds. But instead of launching an ice attack, he focused the cold energy inward, then projected it as a wave of pure antithermal energy. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Valifor's dark energy beam crystallized midair, shattering like glass. The devil himself was driven backward, frost forming on his armor and skin as the absolute zero wave washed over him. "Impossible," Valifor gasped, his breath visible in the suddenly frigid air. "No sacred gear combines with non-human DNA like this." "First time for everything," Big Chill replied. He glanced at Akeno, who was holding her own against the second devil, her lightning keeping him at bay. The first devil remained trapped in the ice crystal, unable to break free. The dimensional rift behind them pulsed again. Growing unstable, energy arced from its edges, striking the tower's structure with enough force to shake the entire observation deck. "The rift is collapsing," Akeno called out, momentarily distracted. Her opponent seized the opportunity, lunging forward with his blade. Big Chill reacted without thinking. He extended his hand, and a beam of concentrated cold shot forth, striking the attacking devil square in the chest. Unlike his usual freezing ability, this beam seemed to affect the devil on a deeper level, his very essence. The devil's form shimmered, his movement slowing as if time itself was freezing around him. Valifor snarled in frustration. "Retreat. The rift is unstable," he gestured, creating a smaller portal beside the main rift. "This isn't over, bearer of the adaptive sacred gear. House Valifor will return." He grabbed his frozen comrade, shattering the ice with a pulse of dark energy, and dragged him toward the escape portal. The time frozen. Devil broke free of the effect just enough to stagger after them. All three disappeared through the portal just as the main rift began to collapse in on itself, energy discharging in increasingly violent bursts. "We need to close it properly before it destabilizes completely," Akeno said urgently. A collapsing rift could tear a permanent hole between dimensions. "How?" Big Chill asked, eyeing the chaotic energy warily. Akeno moved to stand beside him. "My power alone isn't enough, but combined with your new abilities." She extended her hands toward the rift, lightning gathering in intensity. "Focus your energy alongside mine. The opposing forces might neutralize the dimensional tear." Big Chill nodded, extending his hands as well. He channeled the cold energy that now felt so much more powerful and directed, focusing it into a concentrated beam that met Akeno's lightning halfway to the rift. Where the two energies collided, something remarkable happened. They didn't cancel out but rather combined, forming a spiraling helix of cold lightning that struck the center of the rift. The effect was immediate. The rift's chaotic swirling slowed, its edges beginning to draw inward. The arc energy that had been discharging in random directions now seemed to be pulled back toward the center, like water down a drain. "It's working," Akeno called out, increasing the intensity of her lightning. Big Chill matched her effort, channeling more of the strange combined power through his transformed body. The helix of energy brightened, forcing the rift to contract further until it was merely the size of a basketball. With a final surge of combined power, they forced the rift closed. The resulting implosion released a shockwave of air that washed over the observation deck, but the dangerous dimensional tear was gone. Big Chill lowered his hands, studying them with newfound curiosity. "That was not standard necrophrygian ability." "No," Akeno agreed, her wings folding behind her. "That was sacred gear energy working in harmony with your alien form. I've never seen anything quite like it." Before they could discuss it further, the Omnitrix symbol on Big Chill's chest beeped rapidly and flashed red. The transformation reversed, returning Ben to his human form in a flash of red light. He staggered slightly, feeling the energy drain more acutely than usual. "That takes more out of me than standard transformations," he noted, checking the Omnitrix. The faceplate continued to pulse with that strange rhythm, though less erratically than before. Combining two types of power would naturally require more energy. Akeno observed. "Your body is channeling forces it wasn't designed for." The sound of approaching footsteps drew their attention. Emerging onto the observation deck, were two familiar figures. Gwen Tennyson, her hands glowing with mana energy, and Kevin Levin, portions of his skin already transformed to absorb the metal of the tower's structure. "Ben," Gwen called out, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. "What happened?" "We saw energy discharges from halfway across the city." Ben glanced at Akeno, then back to his friends. "Would you believe me if I said we just prevented a devil invasion from a parallel dimension?" Kevin's partially metallic face twisted into a wry smile. "Tuesday already." Gwen's attention had already shifted to Akeno, her nodite senses clearly detecting something unusual. "You're not human," she stated directly. "At least, not entirely." "Neither are you," Akeno replied with equal directness. "Your aura has a cosmic quality I've rarely encountered." Ben stepped between them, making introductions. "Gwen, Kevin, this is Akeno Himejima. She helped me fight off the devils and close the rift. Akeno, these are my cousin Gwen and her boyfriend Kevin. They're part of my team." "Charmed," Akeno said with a slight bow. Kevin studied her with undisguised curiosity. "So, devils, like actual pitchfork and horns devils?" "Not quite so primitive in appearance," Akeno replied with amusement. "But yes, actual devils from the underworld. They were after this." She gestured toward the Omnitrix. Gwen's eyes widened. "The Omnitrix? Why?" Ben held up his wrist, showing how the device continued to pulse with that strange rhythm. "Because it's absorbed something called sacred gear energy, some kind of supernatural power from Akeno's dimension. Apparently, it's a big deal." "Sacred gear," Gwen repeated, frowning. "I've read something about those in my magical studies. They're supposed to be divine artifacts created by the God of the Bible." "Your cousin is well informed," Akeno noted, looking impressed. "She's the brains of the operation," Ben said with a slight smile. "Always has been." Kevin had moved to the edge of the observation deck, examining the scorched metal where the rift had been. "Whatever came through here left some weird residue. Not like any energy signature I've ever absorbed before. Devil magic has a distinctive aura," Akeno explained. "It's derived from darkness and chaos energies, fundamentally different from most alien technologies or even human sorcery." Gwen joined Kevin, running her glowing hand above the residue without touching it. "She's right. This feels older, somehow. Like it's operating on different fundamental principles than anodite energy or the magic I've studied." Ben watched them, a familiar tension building in his chest. New threat, new complications, new responsibilities. The life of a hero never simplified, it only ever became more complex. So what now? They got devils interested in the Omnitrix, dimensional rifts appearing in major cities, and the Omnitrix itself behaving unpredictably. "Now," Akeno said, turning to face him fully, "we need allies who understand both worlds. I serve a devil heiress named Rias Grimori, who stands against factions like House Valifor. With your permission, I'd like to arrange a meeting." "More devils?" Kevin asked skeptically. "Not all devils seek conquest," Akeno assured him. "Many value balance and cooperation. Rias maintains peaceful relations with many human organizations." Ben considered the options. Standa, Road Plumber Protocol would dictate containing the situation, reporting to headquarters, and establishing a defensive perimeter around any potential incursion points. But experience had taught him that sometimes understanding new threats required unorthodox approaches. "Gwen?" he asked, seeking his cousin's perspective as he often did in complicated situations. Gwen studied Akeno for a long moment, her anodite senses likely perceiving things neither Ben nor Kevin could. Finally, she nodded. "I think we should meet with her. This crosses into magical territory that even I'm not familiar with. We need experts." "Agreed," Ben said. He turned to Akeno. Set up the meeting, but neutral ground, and we bring our own backup. Akeno smiled, seemingly pleased with his caution. Of course, there's an abandoned shrine in the mountains outside Tokyo. Sacred ground that no faction can claim advantage on. Tomorrow at sunset. Ben nodded, then glanced at the Omnitrix. It continued to pulse with that strange rhythm. But somehow the pattern seemed more harmonious now, as if the device was gradually adapting to its new energy source. One more question, he said. You called what happened to the Omnitrix an adaptive sacred gear. Is that significant? Akeno's expression grew more serious. Potentially very significant. Most sacred gears have fixed abilities, a specific weapon, power, or contained entity. One that adapts to its user and evolves new abilities is exceptionally rare. She paused, choosing her words carefully. In fact, the only sacred gears with that level of adaptability are low NGINUS class, the 13 most powerful sacred gears, each capable of slaying gods. The weight of her words settled over the group. Ben had wielded the Omnitrix for years, understanding it was among the most powerful devices in the galaxy. But the idea that it had now absorbed energy potentially capable of killing gods added a new dimension to his responsibility. Of course it is, he sighed, rubbing his temple. Because apparently being able to transform into 70 different alien species wasn't complicated enough. Kevin chuckled, clapping him on the shoulder. Look on the bright side, Tennyson. At least life's never boring. As they prepared to leave the tower, Ben caught Akeno watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher, curiosity mixed with something else. When their eyes met, she smiled. What? He asked. I was just thinking, she replied, how interesting it is that the sacred gear energy found you specifically. Such power tends to seek out those with the strength of character to wield it responsibly. Her smile deepened. The universe seems to think highly of you, Ben Tennyson. Ben wasn't sure how to respond to that. After 7 years as a hero, he'd leer. Ned to carry the weight of responsibility without letting it crush him, to balance the burden of power with the simple desire to do good. Whatever this new development meant, whatever new threats it might bring, he would face them as he always had. Let's just hope the universe knows what it's doing, he said finally. Because something tells me things are about to get a lot more complicated. As the group departed Tokyo Tower, none of them noticed the small, shadowy figure observing from a higher level of the structure. It remained perfectly still until they were gone, then melted into the darkness with a soft, satisfied chuckle. The wheels are in motion, it whispered to the empty air. The bearer has been found. Now the real game begins. Chapter 2. Alliances and Revelations. Morning IVED in Tokyo with golden light filtering through the narrow blinds of Ben's hotel room. He sat cross-legged on the bed, studying the Omnitrix with the intense focus of a scientist examining an unpredictable experiment. Throughout the night, the device had continued its strange pulsing pattern, a rhythmic alternation between standard green energy and the new purple hue that signified the sacred gear integration. Any change? Gwen asked, setting a cup of coffee on the nightstand beside him. She'd spent the early hours reviewing ancient texts on her laptop, cross-referencing her magical knowledge. With what little information existed about sacred gears in her database. Ben rotated his wrist, watching how the light played across the Omnitrix's surface. It's stabilizing, I think. The pulses are becoming more regular, less erratic. He glanced up at his cousin. Found anything useful in your research? Gwen tucked a strand of red hair behind her ear, her expression betraying frustration. Not much. Most references to sacred gears are buried in religious texts or obscure mythological accounts. It's difficult to separate fact from fiction. She sat beside him, reaching for her own coffee. What I can confirm is that they're supposed to be divine artifacts, tools created by the biblical God and distributed to humans throughout history. And now one's bonded with alien technology, Ben mused. No wonder those devils were interested. The hotel room door opened as Kevin entered, carrying a bag of takeout breakfast. The dark-haired former delinquent had spent the early morning scouting the city for any residual signs of dimensional activity. City's quiet, he announced, dropping the food on the small table. Whatever those rifts were, they're not leaving any traces our tech can detect. Which means standard plumber containment protocols won't be effective, Gwen concluded. Ben stood, stretching muscles sore from yesterday's unusual transformations. That's why we're meeting with Akeno and her boss. Leader, whatever you call a devil heiress. Kevin unwrapped what appeared to be a Japanese egg sandwich. Still can't believe we're talking about actual devils. Not aliens that inspired devil myths. Not interdimensional beings that call themselves devils. Actual, biblical, souls and sin devils. Says the guy who can absorb matter and energy through his skin, Ben replied with a slight smirk. Fair point, Kevin conceded through a mouthful of sandwich. Gwen's phone chimed with a message notification. It's from Rook. He's finished the analysis of the energy readings from Tokyo Tower. She scrolled through the data, her expression growing more concerned. The dimensional breach registered on frequencies we've never monitored before. Energy signatures unlike anything in the Plumber database. Which means we're flying blind, Ben said, reaching for his jacket. All the more reason to meet with Akeno's group. He checked the Omnitrix again, noting how the pulses had indeed become more rhythmic. But first, I need to understand what this thing is capable of now. Kevin raised an eyebrow. You're not thinking of transforming again before we know more. Controlled test, Ben clarified. There's a plumber training facility beneath Tokyo. Underground, shielded, designed to contain even the most volatile alien transformations. His expression hardened with determination. I need to know what we're dealing with before we meet these devils. 40 minutes later, Ben stood in the center of a reinforced chamber deep beneath Tokyo's financial district. The FAC, ILITY was one of dozens established around the globe after Earth had become known to the wider galactic community, a place where plumbers could train, contain alien threats, or test equipment away from civilian populations. Behind a transparasteel barrier, Gwen monitored an array of sensors while Kevin and Rook Blanco stood ready to intervene if necessary. The Ravanagander had arrived shortly after they'd contacted him. His analytical mind and technical expertise invaluable for understanding the Omnitrix's new condition. All containment fields at maximum, Rook reported, his feline features set in a serious expression. The chamber will withstand energy discharges up to class -12. Good thing too, Kevin muttered. Last time Ben tested a new transformation, he leveled half a mountain. That was one time, Ben protested. And technically, it was a hill. Gwen activated the communication system. We're ready when you are, Ben. Start with something low risk, maybe Echo or Swampfire. Ben nodded, twisting the Omnitrix dial until he found the Sonorosian DNA pattern. Echo should be safe enough. Sound-based powers are easier to control than most. He raised his hand over the dial. Here goes nothing. The familiar flash of transformation light enveloped him, but immediately they all noticed the difference. Instead of pure green, the energy swirled with purple undertones, creating a spectral pattern as it restructured Ben's molecular composition. When the light faded, Echo stood in the chamber, but significantly altered from his usual form. The typically white silicon-based body now featured intricate purple circuit-like patterns running across its surface. The black sound holes on his body glowed with internal energy, and he stood several inches taller than the normal Echo transformation. Most notably, a pair of small crystalline structures protruded from his shoulders like sound amplifiers. Whoa! Echo's voice resonated differently, carrying harmonic undertones that seemed to vibrate at multiple frequencies simultaneously. This feels different, remarkable, Rook observed, studying the readings on the monitor. The Sonorosian DNA has been enhanced by the sacred gear energy. Signal amplification, frequency modulation, wavelength diversity, all baseline abilities, but exponentially more powerful. Kevin crossed his arms. In English, fuzzy. It means I can do more with sound now, Echo explained, examining his modified form. Let's test it. He turned toward a series of targets at the far end of the chamber, reinforced metal plates designed to measure impact force. Normally, Echo could project sonic screams powerful enough to shatter glass or disorient opponents. The alien raised his hands, the sound holes on his palms glowing brighter. Instead of the usual sonic scream, a concentrated beam of visible sound waves emerged, purple-tinged energy that struck the first target with precision. The metal didn't just vibrate or dent. It molecularly disintegrated, particles separating as the harmonics found the exact resonant frequency needed to break atomic bonds. That's new, Echo said, staring at his hands in surprise. The readings on Gwen's monitor spiked dramatically. Ben, the energy output just jumped to class 10. Whatever you're doing, it's not just sound anymore, it's some kind of harmonic destruction energy. Echo nodded, turning to a second target. This time, he tried a different approach, creating a sphere of contained sound between his hands. The energy condensed, rotating faster until it resembled a miniature purple star of pure sonic energy. With a gentle pushing motion, he sent it floating toward the target. Upon impact, the sphere didn't explode, instead, it created a perfect spherical void in the target. The metal simply ceasing to exist where the energy touched it. Destruction element, Echo murmured, recalling Akeno's words. The sacred gear energy has a destruction affinity. Rook was frantically documenting every observation. The Omnitrix appears to be combining sonoerosion sound manipulation with what these texts describe as holy destruction, a power associated with fallen angels. Try duplicating, Gwen suggested, referring to Echo's natural ability to create copies of himself. Echo nodded and focused, but instead of the straightforward multiplication he was accustomed to, something different happened. His body glowed briefly before 3 duplicates formed. However, each duplicate manifested slightly differently. One had larger sound amplifiers on its shoulders. Another featured more extensive purple circuitry, and the third seemed to generate a visible aura of vibrating energy. Specialized duplication, the Prime Echo observed with fascination. Each copy has different abilities. The sacred gear energy isn't just amplifying your alien forms, Gwen realized. It's evolving them, creating specialized variants with distinct advantages. Ben allowed the duplicates to reintegrate before touching the Omnitrix symbol on his chest. In another flash of purple-green light, he reverted to human form, looking slightly drained but otherwise unharmed. That was intense, he said, rejoining the others behind the barrier. It's like each transformation has new dimensions now, deeper access to the alien DNA's potential. Rook was already compiling the data. Based on these readings, I hypothesize that the sacred gear energy is acting as a catalyst, unlocking evolutionary potential within each alien species that would normally take millennia to develop naturally. Or creating hybrid abilities that wouldn't exist at all, Gwen added. The destruction element Akeno mentioned isn't part of sonoerosion biology, it's being added by the sacred gear. Kevin, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. So what happens if you transform into something already destructive? Like way bigger atomics? The question hung in the air, its implications clear. Ben's most powerful transformations were already capable of devastating force. Enhanced by sacred gear energy with a destruction affinity. Let's not find out unless absolutely necessary, Ben decided firmly. For now, I need to focus on control and understanding. Power without direction is just chaos. Very wise, Ben Tennyson, came a voice from the entrance to the observation room. They all turned to see Akeno standing in the doorway, still wearing what appeared to be a school uniform despite being clearly several years beyond high school age. Beside her stood a young G-man with short blonde hair and an open, friendly face that somehow managed to convey both innocence and ancient wisdom simultaneously. "How did you get in here?" Kevin demanded, instinctively adopting a defensive stance. "This is a secured plumber facility." Akeno smiled apologetically. "My apologies for the intrusion. Your security systems are impressive against technological threats, but less effective against magical teleportation circles." She gestured to her companion. "This is Kiba Yuto, a fellow member of Rias Grimori's household. We came to escort you to the meeting." Rook moved to check the security systems. His expression troubled. "She is correct. Our sensors detected nothing." Ben approached their unexpected visitors, studying them with cautious curiosity. "The meeting isn't until sunset. Why the early arrival?" The blonde young man, Kiba, stepped forward with a polite bow. "Circumstances have changed. There's been another incursion attempt near Kyoto. Rias thought it prudent to accelerate our timetable." Gwen moved to stand beside her cousin, her hands subtly glowing with anodite energy. "Another dimensional breach, an attempted one," Akeno clarified. "It was prevented, but the frequency of these attempts suggests coordinated action. House Valifor is moving more aggressively than we anticipated." Ben glanced at his team, silently conferring with each of them. Gwen gave a slight nod, while Kevin shrugged in reluctant acceptance. Rook maintained his professional composure but inclined his head in deference to Ben's leadership. "All right," Ben decided, "we'll come with you now. But we travel together, using our own transportation." Kiba smiled, his expression disarmingly genuine. "Of course, we wouldn't expect you to trust us completely yet. Trust is earned, not given." As they prepared to leave, Akeno moved closer to Ben, speaking quietly enough that only he could hear. "Your control during that test was impressive. Most who suddenly gain sacred gear POW or struggle with its destructive potential." Ben met her violet eyes, noting the genuine assessment in her gaze. "I've had practice with power. Lots of it. The first summer I had the Omnitrix, I was a walking disaster zone." "And now?" she asked. "Now I understand that having power isn't the same as knowing when to use it," he replied simply. Something in his response seemed to please her. Her smile deepened momentarily before she resumed her more formal demeanor. "The shrine is about 2 hours outside Tokyo by conventional travel. Shall we proceed?" The journey to the abandoned shrine took place in a plumber transport vehicle, an unmarked van with technology far beyond anything commercially available on Earth. Rook drove with his usual precision, following coordinates provided by Kiba. Ben occupied the passenger seat, while Gwen, Kevin, Akeno, and Kiba sat in the customized rear compartment. As Tokyo's urban landscape gradually gave way to forested mountains, the conversation turned to more substantive matters. "So," Kevin began, his natural suspicion barely concealed, "devils, angels, fallen angels, you're saying all these biblical entities actually exist?" Kiba nodded, his posture relaxed despite the underlying tension. "Yes, though perhaps not exactly as human religious texts describe them. We exist in parallel dimensions that occasionally intersect with the human world. Like the null void," Gwen suggested, making connections to familiar concepts. "A pocket dimension adjacent to our own. Similar in principle," Akeno agreed, "though the underworld, where devils reside, is far more stable and developed. Cities, cultures, political systems, an entire civilization invisible to most humans." Ben glanced back from the front seat. "And these factions, angels, fallen angels, devils, you're all at peace now?" "An uneasy peace," Kiba admitted. "The great war between the three factions ended centuries ago, leaving all sides depleted. A formal ceasefire has held, but tensions remain, particularly between conservative and progressive elements within each faction. House Valifor represents one of the more aggressive devil houses," Akeno elaborated. "They believe devils should reclaim their former glory, subjugating other races and dimensions. While Rias Grimori's faction favors cooperation and balance," Ben surmised. Kiba smiled. "Precisely. Rias belongs to one of TH's most progressive and powerful devil houses. Her brother Searzex is one of the 4 Satans who rule the underworld." Kevin raised an eyebrow. "Satan, as in the Satan, a title, not a specific individual," Akeno explained. "After the original Lucifer fell in battle, the underworld restructured its leadership. The 4 most powerful devils took titles based on the original fallen angels: Lucifer, Beelzebub, Asmodeus, and Leviathan." Gwen, ever the scholar, was connecting dots rapidly. "And sacred gears, these divine artifacts, they were created as weapons against devils." "Originally, yes," Kiba confirmed. Though something flickered across his expression, a brief shadow that suggested personal history with the topic. "But their purpose has evolved. Now they often serve as balancing elements in the supernatural ecosystem. Some devils even work alongside sacred gear users." Rook, who had been silently absorbing this information while driving, finally spoke. "This dimensional structure is fascinating. It bears similarities to theoretical models of multiverse coherence developed by Galvan scientists." "The Galvan," Akeno repeated. "Those would be the small, highly intelligent aliens who created Ben's Omnitrix, correct? We've done some research of our own since our encounter." Ben couldn't help but feel impressed by their thoroughness. Asmith would either be fascinated or horrified to learn his technology has merged with supernatural power. "Probably both," Gwen said with a slight smile. "You know how he gets about unexpected modifications to his work." The van began ascending a winding mountain road, the forest growing denser around them. Ancient cedar trees towered overhead, their massive trunks and spreading branches creating a natural cathedral effect. The quality of light changed, taking on a golden-green hue filtered through countless leaves. "We're entering sacred ground," Akeno explained as the atmosphere noticeably shifted. "This mountain has been considered a boundary between worlds for centuries. Even before formal shrines were built, it was a place where the veil between dimensions thinned naturally." Ben felt it, a subtle vibration through the Omnitrix, the pulsing rhythm accelerating slightly. The device seemed responsive to the changing spiritual energy around them. "The Omnitrix feels it," he noted. "Like it's resonating with something." Kiba nodded. "Sacred ground amplifies supernatural energy. It's making the sacred gear aspect of your device more active." The road eventually ended at a weathered stone stairway that ascended further up the mountainside. Ancient torii gates, their vermilion paint faded to a subdued rust color, marked the path at intervals. "We continue on foot from here," Akeno said as they exited the vehicle. "The Shrine doesn't permit modern technology beyond this point." Kevin eyed the endless stairs with resignation. "Of course it doesn't." The ascent took nearly 20 minutes, the stone steps worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims. No one spoke much during the climb, each lost in their own thoughts or observations. Ben noticed how the atmosphere continued to change, the air becoming clearer, carrying scents of moss and ancient wood, while a subtle energy seemed to flow around them like an invisible current. The Omnitrix's pulsing had stabilized into a steady rhythm that somehow matched the cadence of their footsteps on the ancient stone. Finally, they reached the shrine complex, a collection of wooden structures built in traditional Japanese style, their graceful curved roofs and weathered wooden pillars speaking of centuries of history. Unlike abandoned buildings in the human world, these structures showed no signs of graffiti or vandalism, only the natural aging of materials exposed to the elements. "The local spirits protect this place," Akeno explained, noting their observation. "Few humans ever stumble upon it, and those who do feel an instinctive reverence." At the center of the complex stood the main shrine building, its entrance flanked by stone statues of fox guardians. The sliding doors were already open, warm light spilling out onto the worn wooden porch. Standing in the doorway was a young woman with long crimson hair that cascaded down her back like living flame. Her striking blue-green eyes carried both youthful vitality and ancient knowledge, a contradiction that Ben was beginning to recognize as characteristic of these supernatural beings. She wore a simple but elegant black dress that contrasted dramatically with her hair. "Ben Tennyson," she said, her voice carrying an aural authority softened by genuine warmth. "I am Rias Gramori. Welcome to neutral ground." Ben stepped forward, instinctively straightening his posture. "Thank you for meeting with us. This is my team, my cousin Gwen Tennyson, Kevin Levin, and Rook Blanco." Rias nodded to each of them in turn. "Please, come inside. We have much to discuss." The interior of the shrine was minimally furnished but comfortable, with tatami mats covering the floor and traditional sitting cushions arranged in a circle. Candles and paper lanterns provided warm illumination, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow across the ancient wooden beams overhead. Already seated within were 3 individuals, a petite white-haired girl whose expressionless face and golden eyes suggested something other than human, a young woman with long black hair tied in a ponytail who wore glasses and carried herself with disciplined composure, and a young man with short brown hair who, unlike the others, radiated a distinct human aura despite the power that seemed to pulse within him. "My household," Rias explained as everyone took seats on the cushions. Kaneko Tuju, Tsubaki Shinra, and Issei Hyodo each nodded in acknowledgement as they were introduced. Once everyone was settled, servants, whom Ben noted appeared to be neither human nor devil, but some other form of supernatural being, brought tea in tradition. Ceramic cups before silently withdrawing. Rias took a sip from her cup before addressing the group. "I appreciate your willingness to meet under these unusual circumstances. The situation we face concerns both our worlds and requires cooperation beyond traditional boundaries." "You mentioned another incursion attempt," Gwen prompted. "Yes," Rias confirmed, her expression growing more serious. Quote, "House Valifor attempted to create a dimensional breach near Kyoto yesterday evening. Had they succeeded, they would have had access to one of Japan's most spiritually significant locations, a potential catastrophe." "Why?" Ben asked. What's their objective? Rias exchanged glances with Akeno before responding. We believe they're seeking to establish permanent gateways between dimensions, allowing for large-scale movement of devil forces without the limitations of traditional summoning methods. An invasion, Kevin summarized bluntly. Essentially, yes, Rias agreed. Though targeted rather than general. House Valifor doesn't want to conquer the human world outright. That would unite the other devil houses against them and potentially bring angels into the conflict. Instead, they're seeking specific advantages that would elevate their position within devil society. Like the Omnitrix, Ben concluded, glancing down at his wrist. The device continued its steady pulse, somehow more pranu. NCED in this spiritually charged environment. Rias nodded. The Omnitrix was already one of the most powerful devices in this dimension. Now that it's absorbed sacred gear energy, she left the implication hanging. About that, Gwen interjected. How exactly did that happen? Sacred gears are supposed to be bound to human souls, not technology. It was Akeno who answered. We have a theory. The void harvester Ben encountered was likely carrying a sacred gear extracted from its previous user, a forbidden practice that requires the user's death. When Ben damaged the harvester, the unbound sacred gear sought a new vessel. And found the Omnitrix, Ben finished. Which is designed to absorb and recombine DNA. Precisely, Rias confirmed. The Omnitrix's adaptive capabilities created a unique situation, neither purely technological nor purely supernatural, but a hybrid of both. The brown-haired young man, Issei, spoke up for the first time, his voice carrying less formal refinement than the others. It's like what happened with my boosted gear, right? An unexpected compatibility that created something new. Rias smiled at him with obvious affection. Similar, yes, Issei is a sacred Heia. Our user himself, one of the 13 Longinus class sacred gears. His particular sacred gear contains the spirit of one of the 2 heavenly dragons. Ben looked at Issei with new interest. The young man appeared ordinary in most respects, yet apparently hosted power comparable to what the Omnitrix had absorbed. So what's the plan? Kevin asked, ever practical. How do we stop these Valifor devils from making more portals? Tsubaki, the glasses-wearing young woman, spoke in precisely measured tones. We've been tracking energy fluctuations that precede dimensional breaches. They follow specific patterns that allow us to predict possible incursion points. But prevention requires understanding exactly what's happening to the Omnitrix, Rias continued. The sacred gear energy it absorbed ours to be resonating with the breaches, either attracting them or being attracted to them. Ben frowned. You think the Omnitrix is causing these rifts? Not causing, Akeno clarified. Connecting. Cred gears naturally seek to fulfill their purpose. If this particular sacred gear was designed to bridge dimensions or break barriers, then it's trying to do that through the Omnitrix, Gwen concluded. Without Ben's conscious control, quote, the implications weren't lost on anyone present. If the Omnitrix was inadvertently facilitating dimensional breaches, Ben himself represented both a solution and a potential vulnerability. I need to learn to control this new aspect of the Omnitrix, Ben stated, determination evident in his voice. Just like I learned to master each alien transformation. Rias nodded. That's why we've brought you here. This sacred ground has properties that allow for safer manipulation of supernatural energies. My household includes experts in various aspects of magical and sacred gear training. I can help with the destruction element, Akeno offered. My own powers share that affinity. And I can assist with understanding the draconic energy signatures, Issei added. If your sacred gear has any dragon aspects, that is. Ben looked around the circle, noting the genuine offers of assistance. Despite their supernatural nature and evident power, Rias and her household displayed none of the conquering ambition he'd encountered in so many alien species over the years. Their concerns seemed genuine. All right, he agreed, but my team stays with me. We work together or not at all. Rias smiled, seeming pleased rather than offended by his condition. Of course, trust is essential for this kind of training. She rose gracefully to her feet. We should begin immediately. House Valifor won't remain idle for long. The training began in a clearing behind the main shrine building, a perfect circle of packed earth surrounded by ancient stone markers. The after Noon sun filtered through the cedar branches overhead, creating dappled patterns that shifted with the mountain breeze. Ben stood at the center of the circle, Gwen and Akeno flanking him on either side. Rias, Issei, and the others observed from the perimeter, while Rook monitored the Omnitrix's readings with a specialized scanner. The first step, Akeno explained, is understanding that sacred gear energy responds to emotion and will. Unlike technology that follows programmed instructions, this power reacts to your internal state. Like mana, Gwen suggested. Emotional energy shaped by focused intention. Similar, Akeno agreed. Ben, I want you to try transforming into a form with elemental affinity. Fire or electricity would align well with destruction energy. Ben nodded, cycling out the Omnitrix until he found the familiar silhouette. Heat Blast should work. He pressed down on the dial, initiating the transformation. The now familiar purple-green light enveloped him, turning his molecular composition into the pyronite form. When the transformation completed, Heat Blast stood in the circle, but as in Tokyo, the form showed significant modifications. Purple flame int R mixed with the standard orange-yellow fire, and crystalline structures protruded from various points on his magma-like body. Fascinating, Rias observed. The sacred gear energy has physically manifested within the transformation. How does it feel? Gwen asked. Heat Blast flexed his hands, watching as purple flames danced between his fingers. Powerful, more intense than usual, but also more refined somehow. Like I have greater control over the flame's properties. That's the sacred gear influence, Akeno explained. Now, focus on that feeling of refinement. Sacred gear energy can be aped with precision that raw elemental power often lacks. Heat Blast extended his hand, summoning a sphere of flame. Initially, it formed as a standard fireball, but as he concentrated on Akeno's guidance, the flames shifted. Purple energy becoming more prominent as the sphere compressed into a more perfect form, its surface becoming smooth and uniform. Good, Akeno encouraged. Now try to shape Chi further, give it purpose beyond destruction. Heat Blast concentrated, focusing not just on the physical properties of the flame but on what he wanted it to accomplish. The sphere responded, elongating G into a cylindrical shape before branching out in a complex pattern that resembled a snowflake made of purple fire. Impressive control, Rias noted. Most new sacred gear users struggle with basic manifestation for weeks. Ben's had years of practice manipulating energy in various forms, Gwen explained with evident pride in her cousin's abilities. He may not use magic the way I do, but he understands how to direct power. From the sidelines, Issei stepped forward. Can I try something? At Rias's nod, he approached Heat Blast. My sacred gear responds to other sacred gears. It might help identify what type you've absorbed. He extended his left arm, and in a flash of red light, a crimson gauntlet materialized, covering his hand and forearm with dragon-like scales and a prominent green jewel embedded in the back of the hand. Boosted gear, he explained. One of the 13 Longinus, containing the spirit of the Red Dragon Emperor, D-Drake. As the gauntlet came near the Omnitrix symbol on Heat Blast's chest, both began to react. The green jewel in Issei's gauntlet glowed brightly, while the Omnitrix symbol pulsed with increasing intensity. The dragon senses something, Issei said, his expression focused as if listening to an internal voice. Not another dragon, but something similarly ancient. A boundary breaker. The reaction intensified, energy crackling between the two sacred gears. Suddenly, the Omnitrix symbol flashed blindingly, and a voice emerged. Not Ben's, not the Omnitrix's standard robotic tone, but something older, with a resonant quality that seemed to echo from great distance. Dimensional veil, breached. Protocol activated. Seek the convergence point. The voice faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving a startled silence in its wake. The purple flames on Heat Blast's body flared momentarily before settling back into their previous state. What was that? Ben demanded, his transformed voice carrying additional harmonics of concern. Rias stepped forward, her expression grave. I believe we just heard from the sacred gear itself. Some contain sentient entities or fragments of consciousness from their creators. It spoke about a dimensional veil and convergence point. Gwen noted. That aligns with what we know about the rifts. Rook checked his scanner. The Omnitrix experienced a significant energy spike during that interaction. It appears the proximity of another Longinus-class sacred gear triggered some kind of response protocol. Ben touched the Omnitrix symbol on his chest, reverting to human form. The transformation dissolution felt smoother than before, suggesting increasing integration between the alien technology and supernatural energy. So the sacred gear inside the Omnitrix is looking for something, he summarized. A convergence point, where dimensions meet. Which explains why it's reacting to the breaches, Akeno concluded. It's not causing them, it's responding to them. Kevin, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the training, finally spoke up. So Valifor isn't after the Omnitrix directly. They're trying to find this convergence point, and they think the sacred gear will lead them to it. Which means I'm not the target. Ben realized. I'm the tracker. Rias nodded slowly. That would explain their tactics. The attack in Tokyo wasn't meant to capture you, it was a test to see how His sacred gear would respond to a dimensional breach. And now they know it does respond, Gwen said grimly. Which means they'll create more breaches, forcing the sacred gear to react in potential. Why reveal the convergence point they're seeking? The implications settled heavily on the group. Whatever this convergence point was, its importance to beings as powerful as Devil's suggested cosmic significance. We need more information, Ben decided, about this specific sacred gear, about what a convergence point might be, and about House Valifor's ultimate objective. Rias exchanged glances with her household members before responding. There is someone who might know more, an expert in sacred gear lore with access to archives predating the Great War. Another devil? Kevin asked suspiciously. No, Rias replied. A fallen angel researcher named Azazel, the Governor General of the Grigori organization and one of the most knowledgeable beings on sacred gear functionality. Akeno's expert. Seijin tightened almost imperceptibly at the name, a reaction Ben noted but didn't comment on. Can we trust him? Gwen asked directly. Azazel has maintained neutrality in faction conflicts for centuries, Rias explained. His interest is scholarly, understanding sacred gears, not exploiting them for power. And he has a vested interest in preventing dimensional catastrophes that would threaten his own research. Tsubaki added pragmatically. Ben considered the option. Throughout his hero career, he'd learned that information often came from unexpected sources. How do we contact him? I can arrange a meeting, Rias offered. But not here. Azazel rarely visits sacred ground associated with Shinto deities. We would need to meet on more neutral territory. My laboratory would be suitable. Came a new voice from the shrine entrance. Everyone turned to see a man with black hair streaked with blonde in the front, wearing what appeared to be a traditional Japanese robe over surprisingly modern clothing. He carried himself with casual confidence that couldn't quite mask the immense power that radiated from him, power different from Rias and her household, carrying a distinctive quality It reminded Ben of storm clouds and ozone. Azazel, Rias acknowledged, her tone respectful but cautious. I didn't expect you to come personally. The fallen angel leader smiled, his expression friendly yet calculating. When multiple dimensional breaches occur in Japan, followed by the emergence of an unknown sacred gear signature that registers on my instruments as Longinus class, my curiosity tends to get the better of me. His gaze shifted to Ben, studying him with scientific interest. So you're the human whose device absorbed sacred gear energy. Fascinating adaptation. He glanced at the Omnitrix. Azimuth's creation, if I'm not mistaken. His reputation extends even to our dimension, though few realize it. Ben stepped forward, meeting the fallen angel's gaze directly. You know about the Omnitrix. I make it my business to know about all significant artifacts, regardless of origin, Azazel replied with a casual shrug. Dimensional boundaries are more permeable to information than most realize. He looked around at the gathered group. I assume you're trying to understand what's happened and why House Valifor is suddenly so interested in creating breaches. You know about that too? Kevin asked. As I said, my instruments detect dimensional fluctuations. Azazel moved further into the shrine, taking a vacant seat on one of the cushions as if he'd been invited all along. And I've been monitoring Valifor's activities for some time. Their interest in boundary manipulation isn't new, but it's recently become more focused. Rias resumed her seat, the others following suit. The dynamic had shifted with Azazel's arrival, adding another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation. What can you tell us about a sacred gear that interacts with dimensional boundaries? Ben asked directly. Azazel studied him thoughtfully before responding. There are several that manipulate space and dimensions in various ways. Dimension Lost can create artificial spaces and transfer objects between them. Telos Karma can create connections between distinct points in space-time. He paused, his expression becoming more serious. But based on what I've observed of your device's energy signature, I suspect you've encountered something rarer, the boundary transgressor. I've never heard of that sacred gear, Akeno said, speaking for the first time since Azazel's arrival. Few have, the fallen angel leader replied. It wasn't created by the biblical god with the original sacred gear system. It's older, a tool forged during the primordial boundary setting that Estibolus had the dimensional architecture of reality itself. The weight of this information settled over the group. Ben glanced at the Omnitrix, its steady pulse now carrying new significance. The voice mentioned a convergence point, he said. What would that be? Azazel's expression grew more animated, the enthusiasm of a scholar discussing a favorite subject. Ah, that's where things get interesting. According to certain ancient texts, the multiverse wasn't always separated into distinct dimensions. Before the Great Boundary Event, all realms existed in a single space: humans, angels, devils, gods, and countless other beings sharing one reality. What happened? Gwen asked, her scholar's curiosity evident. War, naturally, Azazel replied with a hint of cynicism. Cosmic-scale conflict that threatened to unmake reality itself. The solution was separation, the creation of dimensional boundaries that would keep various factions apart, preventing total annihilation. But that separation wasn't absolute, Rias added. Clearly familiar with this history. Points of connection remained, thin places where the boundaries between worlds could still be crossed under specific circumstances. Precisely, Azazel confirmed, and the most significant of these connection points was the convergence nexus, a location where all dimensions remain fundamentally linked, regardless of the boundaries established elsewhere. And Valifor wants to find this nexus, Ben concluded. Control it, Azazel corrected. Whoever controls the convergence nexus could theoretically manipulate the boundaries between all dimensions, strengthening them, weakening them, or removing them entirely. The implications were staggering. Even by Ben's standards, having faced universe-level threats multiple times, the potential for catastrophe was immense. And they think the sacred gear in the Omnitrix can lead them to it, Gwen stated. The boundary transgressor was specifically designed to interact with dimensional boundaries, Azazel explained. In the right hands, it could be used to repair weaknesses or breaches. In the wrong hands, it could help locate the nexus, Ben finished grimly. Azazel nodded, which explains Valifor's strategy. They create controlled breaches, forcing the sacred gear to activate in response. Each activation provides data about how the sacred gear interacts with dimensional boundaries, gradually triangulating the location of the convergence nexus. Then we need to stop responding to the breaches, Kevin suggested. Not possible, Azazel countered. The sacred gear responds automatically to boundary violations. It's literally designed to do so. Even if Ben doesn't consciously activate it, the energy will still react. Then we need to stop the breaches themselves, Ben decided. Cut off their data collection. Easier said than done, Rias cautioned. House Valifor has considerable resources and operates across multiple dimensions. Which is why we need to work together, Ben insisted. My team has experience with cross-dimensional threats, while your groups understand the supernatural aspects better than we do. Azazel studied Ben with renewed interest. You know, most humans would be overwhelmed by now. Discovering multiple supernatural dimensions, learning their technology has merged with divine artifacts, facing devil politics and cosmic convergence points all in the span of a couple days. Ben shrugged. I've been dealing with world-ending crises since I was 10. After a while, you develop a certain perspective. The fallen angel leader laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. I can see why the boundary transgressor chose your device. Sacred gears have a way of finding compatible hosts, those with the right temperament and capacity to utilize their power effectively. He stood, adjusting his robes. My laboratory would be a better place to continue this discussion. I have equipment that can analyze the sacred gear's energy signature more thoroughly. Rias rose as well, and we should inform my brother about these developments. If House Valifor is violating non-interference accords, the Satan Lords need to be aware. Plans were made quickly after that. It was decided that Ben, Gwen, Kevin, and Rook would accompany Azazel to his research facility, while Rias and most of her household would return to Devil territory to brief the appropriate authorities. Akeno, given her expertise with destruction energy, would join Ben's group to continue helping with sacred gear training. As they prepared to leave the shrine, Ben found himself standing eyed Akeno near one of the ancient Torii gates. The afternoon was waning, golden light slanting through the cedar trees at a steep angle that created long shadows across the shrine grounds. You seemed uncomfortable when Azazel arrived, Ben observed quietly. History there. Akeno glanced at him, surprise flickering briefly across her features before her composed expression returned. Perceptive of you. Yes, there's history, though not direct. Azazel is a fallen angel leader. My father is also a fallen angel, though I haven't seen him in many years. The simple statement carried emotional weight that Ben recognized, the complexity of family relationships, especially difficult ones. He'd had his own challenges with his father over the years, though nothing comparable to what Akeno's tone suggested. Complicated family situations seem to be universal across dimensions, he offered. A small, genuine smile touched Akeno's lips. Indeed, though few have family complications involving fallen angels. My grandmother is an energy being from another galaxy, Ben countered with a half-smile. Family gatherings are interesting. That earned a soft laugh from Akeno. It seems we both understand and what it means to exist between worlds. Before they could continue the conversation, Azazel approached, an electronic tablet in hand. I've established a transport circle to my laboratory. It's similar to teleportation technology, though operating on different principles. My team has experience with teleportation, Ben assured him. Lead the way. Azazel's laboratory was unlike anything Ben had expected. Rather than the dark, Gothic architecture he'd begun to associate with supernatural beings, the facility was thoroughly modern, a blend of high-tech equipment and what appeared to be magical artifacts. Arranged with the organized chaos of a brilliant mind prioritizing function over appearance. Large windows offered views of a pristine lake surrounded by mountains, suggesting they were no longer in Tokyo or even necessarily in the same dimension. Holographic displays hovering in midair showed data streams that mixed mathematical formulas with symbols Ben didn't recognize, neither standard Earth languages nor any alien script he'd encountered. Welcome to my primary research facility, Azazel said, gesturing broadly. One of the benefits of being around for millennia is accumulating interesting toys. Kevin immediately gravitated toward what appeared to be an engine component unlike any Earth design. Is that a trans-dimensional drive core? Good eye, Azazel acknowledged with approval. Based on principles I observed in the space between realities. Still experimental, though. Rook was studying the holographic displays with professional interest. These energy mapping algorithms share conceptual similarities with Galvan dimensional calculus, yet the application methodology is entirely different. I'd love to compare notes with Galvan scientists someday, Azazel said, sounding genuinely enthusiastic. Their approach to quantum mechanics is fascinating, from what little information has crossed dimensional boundaries. Ben approached what appeared to be the center. Al workstation, a circular platform surrounded by equipment that reminded him vaguely of the null void projector, though considerably more sophisticated. This is where you want to analyze the Omnitrix? He asked. Yes, Azazel confirmed, becoming more focused. The platform can generate an isolated field that mimics various dimensional conditions. It should help us understand how the boundary transgressor responds to different boundary configurations. As preparations began, Gwen pulled Ben aside, keeping her voice low. Are you sure about this? We're trusting a lot to someone we just met, a fallen angel, no less. Not entirely sure, no, Ben admitted. But Azazel's interest seems genuine, and we need information we don't have. Sometimes you have to take calculated risks. Just be careful, she cautioned. I don't sense deception from him, but he's definitely not showing all his cards. Few beings with that much power ever do, Ben replied, having learned that lesson repeatedly throughout his hero career. The analysis began with Ben standing on the central platform while Azazel calibrated various instruments. Akeno observed from nearby, occasionally offering insights about how sacred gear energy typically manifested. Gwen, Kevin, and Rook monitored the proceedings with varying degrees of caution and interest. "I'll create a controlled simulation of a dimensional boundary," Azazel explained. "Nothing dangerous, just enough to trigger a mild response from the sacred gear." He activated the equipment, and a translucent dome of energy formed around the platform. Ben felt the Omnitrix respond immediately. Its pulsing accelerated, and the device grew noticeably warmer against his skin. "Fascinating," Azazel murmured, studying the readings. "The sacred gear energy is actively probing the boundary, seeking weaknesses and stable points simultaneously." He adjusted several controls. "I'm going to introduce a simulated breach, very small, completely contained." As he did so, the Omnitrix's reaction intensified. The green-purple pulsing became more pronounced, and Ben felt a tingling sensation traveling up his arm from the device. "The sacred gear is attempting to address the breach," Azazel noted with scientific enthusiasm. "Not by closing it, interestingly, but by stabilizing its edges, making it a permanent, controlled opening rather than a chaotic tear." "That aligns with its purpose," Akeno observed. "The boundary transgressor doesn't prevent crossing between dimensions, it regulates and stabilizes such crossings." "Exactly," Azazel agreed, "which makes it extremely valuable to someone like Valifor, who wants to create permanent pathways between dimensions." The simulation continued, with Azazel adjusting various parameters while monitoring the Omnitrix's responses. Throughout the process, Ben remained focused, maintaining awareness of how the device felt and reacted to each change. "I'm detecting an interesting pattern," Azazel eventually said, studying a complex three-dimensional model that had formed in the holographic display. "The sacred gear isn't just responding to the breaches, it's seeking a specific resonance frequency. Each response is slightly calibrated, as if testing different harmonic patterns. Like it's searching for something," Ben suggested, recalling the voice's mention of seeking the convergence point. "Precisely," Azazel confirmed. "It's trying to find the specific frequency that would resonate with the convergence nexus." He deactivated the simulation, the energy dome dissipating. "I believe I understand Valifor's strategy now. Each breach they create has different properties, different dimensional coordinates, different energy signatures. They're cataloging how the boundary transgressor responds to each, gradually narrowing down the resonance pattern that would identify the nexus location. So they're not tracking the sacred gear directly," Gwen realized. "They're using it as a tuning fork to find the right frequency." "An apt analogy," Azazel agreed. "And based on these readings, they've already gathered significant data. I estimate they need only a few more breach events to triangulate the nexus." The implications settled heavily over the group. If House Valifor succeeded in locating and controlling the convergence nexus, the consequences would extend far beyond devil politics. "So what's our countermove?" Kevin asked pragmatically. Azazel considered for a moment before responding. "Two possible approaches: prevent further breaches, or provide false data." "False data?" Ben inquired. "The sacred gear responds to dimensional boundaries. But its response can be influenced by the wielder's intent and will," Azazel explained. "With proper training, you might be able to alter the response pattern, ding Valifor misleading information that leads them away from the true nexus." "How long would this training take?" Rook asked. "Ordinarily, months or years," Azazel admitted. "But given Ben's NCE with the Omnitrix and his demonstrated adaptability." He glanced at Akeno, who nodded in agreement. "Perhaps we could achieve basic control in days rather than months." "We don't have days," Ben pointed out. "If Valifor is close to triangulating the nexus, they'll be creating new breaches imminently." "Then we need to buy time," Gwen suggested. "Perhaps by closing breaches before the sacred gear can fully respond to them." Azazel nodded thoughtfully. "That could work. If we can detect breach formation early enough and neutralize them quickly, we might prevent useful data collection." It means we need an early warning system," Kevin concluded. "I can provide that," Azazel said confidently. "My research network already monitors dimensional fluctuations. With some recalibration, we could detect Valifor's activities with enough advance notice to intervene." A plan began to take shape. Azazel would establish monitoring stations at likely breach points, while Ben worked with Akeno to develop greater control over the sacred gear energy. Rias and her brother would apply political pressure within Devil Society to constrain House Valifor's activities, potentially slowing their efforts. As the discussion continued, refining details and contingencies, Ben found himself reflecting on how quickly his world had expanded, yet again. From a summer vacation discovery at age 10 to intergalactic hero by his teens. And now to a keystone figure in a multidimensional supernatural conflict. The weight of responsibility was familiar, even as its specific form changed. The meeting eventually concluded with assigned tasks and communication protocols established. As the others dispersed to begin preparations, Azazel asked Ben to remain for a more detailed analysis of the Omnitrix's current state. "There's one aspect we haven't discussed," the fallen angel said once they were relatively alone, his tone more serious than before. "The integration of sacred gear energy with the Omnitrix isn't just affecting its functionality, it's affecting you as well." Ben frowned. "What do you mean?" Azazel gestured to one of the holographic displays, which showed a complex energy pattern surrounding a human silhouette. "Sacred gears bond with their wielders at a fundamental level, spiritual, psychological, even biological. The longer you use this power, the more pronounced these changes will become." "What kind of changes?" Ben asked, concern evident in his voice. "Nothing inherently harmful," Azazel assured him. "But your perception may alter. You might begin sensing dimensional boundaries naturally. Without technological assistance, your spiritual energy will likely increase, potentially giving you abilities beyond your transformations." He paused, studying Ben carefully before continuing. "And your lifespan may be affected. Sacred gear wielders often live longer than ordinary humans, especially those with powerful gears." Ben absorbed this information silently. Throughout his hero career, he'd experienced countless transformations and alterations to his being, yet he'd always returned to his human baseline. The idea of permanent changes to his fundamental nature was unsettling, yet not entirely unexpected given the circumstances. "Is there any way to reverse it?" he asked finally. "To separate the sacred gear from the Omnitrix?" "Theoretically, yes," Azazel replied. "But it would be extremely dangerous. Both for you and potentially for the dimensional boundaries themselves. The integration has progressed significantly already." Ben nodded, accepting the reality of the situation. "Then we work with what we have. I've adapted to stranger things." Azazel smiled slightly. "Your reputation for resilience appears well earned." He gestured to another section of the laboratory. "Now, shall we begin your crash course in sacred gear manipulation? Time is rather pressing." The training proceeded intensively over the next several hours, with Azazel guiding Ben through exercises designed to increase his awareness of and control over the sacred gear energy. Akeno joined them, offering insights from her own experience with destruction-aligned powers. By early evening, Ben had made significant progress, learning to sense the subtle vibrations of dimensional boundaries and to modulate the Omnitrix's response to them. The device remained unpredictable in some ways, but he was developing an intuitive understanding of its new dynamics. During a brief rest period, Ben stepped outside onto a balcony overlooking the lake. The sun was setting, casting golden-orange light across the water's surface. Whether this was Earth or some other dimension entirely remained unclear, but the beauty of the landscape was undeniable. Akeno joined him after a few minutes, offering a cup of tea which he accepted gratefully. "You're adapting remarkably well," she observed, "both to the sacred gear energy and to the revelation of supernatural dimensions." Ben smiled slightly. "When you've met as many aliens as I have, angels and devils don't seem that much stranger. Just different categories of non-human intelligent life." "An interesting perspective," Akeno acknowledged. "Though I think you'll find we're more complex than simple categorization would suggest." "I've noticed," Ben replied, glancing at her. In the sunset light, her features were highlighted with a warm glow that accentuated her beauty while somehow making her seem more human than supernatural. "May I ask a personal question?" she inquired after a moment of comfortable silence. "Fair exchange," Ben agreed. "I've been asking plenty of my own." "How do you manage it?" Akeno asked, her tone more serious than before. "The responsibility of such power. The knowledge that your decisions affect entire worlds." The question wasn't what Ben had expected, but it resonated with thoughts he'd had many times throughout his hero career. He considered his answer carefully. "One day at a time," he said finally. "NB. Why remembering that power isn't the point, helping people is. Whether it's stopping an alien invasion or just saving someone from a burning building, the scale doesn't matter as much as the intention." Akeno studied him thoughtfully. Many beings who acquire great power become obsessed with acquiring more, or using what they have to dominate others. Even among devils, angels, and human mages, corruption is a constant threat. "I've seen it happen," Ben acknowledged. "Even been tempted by it myself a few times. But having good people around me helps. Family, friends, mentors who call me out when I start heading down the wrong path." He gestured back toward the laboratory where Gwen, Kevin, and Rook were still collaborating with Azazel on various aspects of their plan. "That's my real power, not the Omnitrix. But the team that keeps me grounded." Before Akeno could respond, an alarm sounded from within the facility, a pulsing tone that immediately put them both on alert. They rushed back in to find Azazel studying a rapidly updating display, his expression grave. "Multiple breach formations detected," he announced as everyone gathered. 3 simultaneous attempts: Tokyo, Kyoto, and a new location in Hokkaido. 3 at once, Kevin asked. "They're accelerating their timeline. They must have realized we're onto them," Gwen suggested. "They're making a final push to gather the data they need." Ben checked the Omnitrix, which had already begun pulsing more rapidly in response to the forming breaches. "We need to split up. 3 locations means 3 teams." "Agreed," Azazel said. "I can transport each group directly to the breach sites using teleportation circles." Plans formed quickly. Ben would handle the Tokyo breach, with Akeno accompanying him due to her familiarity with the city and her compatible power set. Gwen and Rook would take Kyoto, while Kevin would join several of Azazel's associates at the Hokkaido site. "Remember," Azazel cautioned as they prepared to depart, "the objective is to close these breaches quickly, before the sacred gear can fully respond to them. Don't engage Valifor forces unless absolutely necessary, focus on the rifts themselves." Ben nodded, understanding the strategy. "What about Rias and her group?" "Already alerted," Azazel confirmed. "They're mobilizing additional support, but dimensional politics complicate direct intervention." No further explanation was needed. They all understood the delicate balance between the factions. Within minutes, the teleportation circles were prepared, glowing with complex geometric patterns and symbols. "Good luck," Azazel said as the teams took their positions. "And Ben, remember what we practiced. Try to control the sacred gear's response pattern if you can't prevent it entirely." Ben nodded, standing beside Akeno in the Tokyo-bound circle. The Omnitrix continued its accelerated pulsing, almost as if eager to encounter the dimensional breach. As the teleportation activated, surrounding them with light, he caught a final glimpse of Azazel's expression, concern mixed with scientific curiosity, and something else he couldn't quite identify. Then they were gone, hurled across Dimensio-NS toward a conflict that would determine the stability of reality itself. Tokyo materialized around them in a flash of light, specifically, the Tokyo Bay area, where massive shipping containers create a labyrinthine landscape of metal corridors and shadowed spaces. Night had fallen, the industrial zone illuminated by harsh security lights that created stark contrasts between brilliance and darkness. Immediately, Ben sensed what had drawn them here. The air felt wrong, thinner somehow, vibrating with unnatural energy that made his skin prickle. The Omnitrix's pulsing had intensified further, device growing warmer against his wrist. "The breach is forming near the water," Akeno said, her wings materializing as she prepared for potential combat. "I can sense the dimensional distortion." He moved quickly through the container yard, following both the Omnitrix's reactions and Akeno's supernatural senses. As they approached the waterfront, the distortion became visible, a wavering in the air like heat over asphalt, but with an iridescent quality that suggested something fundamentally unnatural. There, Ben pointed to where the distortion was most pronounced, a roughly circular area about 10 feet in diameter, hovering 3 feet above the concrete pier. As they watched, the distortion began to coalesce, the edges becoming more defined as reality itself seemed to fold inward. Through the forming portal, Ben glimpsed the now familiar crimson landscape of what he presumed was the Devil Realm. They're stabilizing it from the other side, Akeno observed, lightning beginning to dance between her fingers. We need to disrupt the formation before it completes. Ben nodded, reaching for the Omnitrix. Time for feedback. His energy absorption should work well against this kind of phenomenon. He activated the transformation, and the familiar green-purple light enveloped him. When it faded, feedback stood ready, the conductoid form modified by sacred gear energy in striking ways. The normally black body now featured purple circuit patterns similar to those seen in his Echo transformation, and the antenna light cables that allowed him to absorb and redirect energy glowed with inner light. Let's shut this down, feedback said, his voice carrying an additional resonant quality. He extended his cables toward the forming breach, connecting with the energy that sustained it. Immediately, he felt a powerful current flow into him, not just electrical energy, but something more fundamental, as if he were tapping into the very forces that maintained the boundaries between dimensions. It's working, Akeno confirmed, watching as the breach's edges became less defined. The energy flow is destabilizing. Feedback concentrated, drawing more power from the breach. The Omnitrix symbol on his chest pulsed in harmony with his efforts, the sacred gear energy within it responding to the dimensional energies he was absorbing. Then, without warning, figures began to emerge. The partially formed portal, humanoid shapes moving with supernatural speed. Devils, Ben recognized immediately, though different from those they'd encountered at Tokyo Tower. These wore what appeared to be specialized combat gear, their movements precise and coordinated like a military unit. Valifor Special Operations Team, Akeno identified them, lightning intensifying around her hands. Elite Forces. The lead devil assessed the situation with a glance, then barked orders in a language Ben didn't understand. 3 of them immediately focused on Akeno, while 2 others began reinforcing the breach with what appeared to be small devices planted around its perimeter. Stabilizers, Akeno called out to Ben. They're forcing the breach to remain open. Feedback couldn't disengage from absorbing the breach energy without risking an explosive collapse. Handle the devils, he called back. I'll keep working on the breach. Akeno needed no further encouragement. With impressive speed, she took to the air, lightning coalescing into spears that she hurled with deadly accuracy. The attacking devils scattered, responding with their own energy attacks. Darkness formed into lances and spears that sliced through the night air. The battle intensified rapidly, magical energy discharging in brilliant flashes that illuminated the dockyard. Akeno proved remarkably formidable, her lightning attacks keeping multiple opponents at bay while she maneuvered with the grace of someone born to aerial combat. Meanwhile, feedback continued drawing energy from the breach, his modified conductoid body processing dimensional power in ways that would have been impossible before the sacred gear integration. He could feel the breach weakening, its structure becoming increasingly unstable. The devils placing the stabilizers realized the threat he posed. One broke off from the main group, charging directly at feedback with a weapon that appeared to be a cross between a sword and a mechanical device. Darkness and technology combined in a way that reminded Ben of Tekkadan weaponry. Unable to disconnect from the breach without risking catastrophic collapse, feedback was in a vulnerable position. He braced for impact, knowing he couldn't dodge without releasing his cables. The attack never connected. A flash of crimson light intercepted the charging devil, sending him flying backward into a stack of containers with enough force to dent the metal. Issei Hyodo stood where the devil had been, his left arm transformed into the dragon scale gauntlet Ben had seen earlier. Thought you might need backup, he called out, a confident grin on his face despite the danger. The arrival of reinforcements shifted the battle dynamics. Issei engaged the remaining devils with impressive physical combat skills enhanced by his sacred gear. While Akeno continued her aerial assault with renewed vigor. Feedback refocused on the breach, which was now visibly shrinking as he continued to absorb its energy. The Omnitrix symbol pulsed more intensely, and he felt the sacred gear responding, not just absorbing energy but actively countering the specific frequency that sustained the breach. That's when he felt it, a subtle change in the energy pattern, a harmonic resonance that seemed to connect this breach with something far larger and more significant. The convergence nexus, he realized. The breach was inadvertently revealing information about the nexus's dimensional signature. Remembering Azazel's training, Feedback concentrated on altering his response pattern, feeding false information back into the breach. Corrupting the data Valifor would be collecting. It was delicate work, requiring precise control over energy flow while maintaining the overall absorption that was closing the breach. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up," Issei called out, knocking another devil backward with a powerful punch. They're getting desperate. Indeed, the Valifor operatives had intensified their efforts, focusing more on protecting the breach than on defeating their opponents. One managed to reach the stabilizers, activating them with a pulse of dark energy. The breach surged in response, temporarily expanding despite Feedback's efforts. The sudden energy spike overwhelmed his absorption capacity, sending feedback loops through his modified body. The Omnitrix symbol flashed erratically, and Ben Fei LT the sacred gear energy responding in ways he couldn't fully control. "Ben," Akeno called out, concern evident in her voice. Feedback gritted his teeth, refusing to release his connection to the breach despite the pain. "I've got this," he managed. "Just keep them off me." Drawing on everything he'd learned about both the Omnitrix and sacred gear energy, he pushed back against the surge, not fighting it directly, but redirecting it. Channeling it through his body and back into the breach in a modified form that disrupted its structural integrity. The stabilizers sparked and shorted out, unable to compensate for the corrupted energy feedback. With a sound like tearing fabric magnified 1,000 times, the breach began to collapse in on itself. The Valifor devils recognized the imminent failure of their mission. The leader barked another command, and they disengaged from combat, retreating toward the collapsing breach with supernatural speed. "They're escaping," Issei shouted, moving to intercept them. "Let them go," Akeno countered. "The breach closure takes priority." As the devils leapt through the rapidly shrinking portal, Feedback continued channeling energy, ensuring the call. Apps proceeded in a controlled manner rather than a catastrophic implosion. The final devil barely made it through before the breach sealed completely, reality snapping back into its proper configurate. Ion with a concussive wave of displaced air. Feedback disconnected his cables, staggering slightly from the exertion. The Omnitrix symbol flashed red, reverting him to human form. Ben dropped to one knee, breathing heavily. "Are you all right?" Akeno asked, landing beside him with her wings still extended. "Yeah," Ben assured her, though his voice betrayed his fatigue. "That took more out of me than I expected." Issei approached. His sacred gear still manifested though no longer needed for combat. "That was some serious power you were channeling. Even my boosted gear noticed it." Ben looked up at them, gathering his strength to stand again. "Did it work? Not just closing the breach, but corrupting their data?" "I believe so," Akeno confirmed. The energy patterns were definitely distorted toward the end. Whether it was enough to mislead them completely. She was interrupted by the chime of her phone. Checking it quickly, she reported, "Message from Rias. The Kyoto breach has been contained. Gwen and Rook were successful." "And Hokkaido?" Ben asked. Akeno's expression grew more serious. "Still ongoing. Kevin and Azazel's associates are encountering heavy resistance." Ben checked the Omnitrix. The device had returned to its steady pulsing pattern, though perhaps slower than before, as if recovering from the exertion just as he was. "We should go help them," he decided, pushing himself to his feet despite his fatigue. "You're exhausted," Issei pointed out. "Using that much sacred gear energy takes a toll, especially when you're still learning to control it." "I've fought through worse," Ben replied simply. It was a statement of fact, not bravado. Throughout his hero career, he'd learned that limits were often more flexible than they appeared, especially when others were in danger. Before they could debate further, Akeno's phone chimed again. Her expression shifted as she read the message, concern giving way to confusion, then alarm. "The Hokkaido breach has closed," she reported. "But not because our team succeeded." She looked up, meeting Ben's eyes. Valifor withdrew all their forces simultaneously, all three breaches, coordinated retreat. Why would they do that? Issei wondered. They had us outnumbered at each location. A cold realization settled over Ben. Because they got what they needed. The breaches weren't the goal, they were a distraction. From what? Akeno asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. From whatever their real operation was, Ben said grimly. These simultaneous breaches were too obvious, too easily detected. They wanted us focused on them while something else happened elsewhere. Issei's sacred gear glowed briefly, and he cocked his head as if listening to something only he could hear. Ddraig says Re's been a major disturbance in the boundary layer, not a breach, but a significant scanning pulse. Something mapped the dimensional boundaries on a massive scale while we were busy with these localized incidents. They've been playing us, Ben realized. All these breaches, the attacks, the interest in the Omnitrix, they were gathering data points, building a comprehensive model of dimensional boundaries. And now they've completed it, Akeno concluded. The question is, what will they do with that information? Before anyone could speculate further, a teleportation circle formed nearby, geometric patterns of light materializing on the concrete. From within it stepped Azazel, his expression unusually grave. We have a problem, the fallen angel leader announced without preamble. Valifor didn't just map the boundaries, they identified the convergence nexus. And it's not where any of us expected. Where is it? Ben asked, already dreading the answer. Azazel's eyes fixed on him, specifically, on the Omnitrix. It's not a where, Ben Tennyson. It's a what. The convergence nexus isn't a location in space, it's a conceptual fulcrum around which all dimensions revolve. He paused, the weak HT of his next words evident in his expression. And based on my analysis of the scanning pulse, Valifor has determined that the Omnitrix itself, specifically its integration with the boundary transgray represents the current manifestation of that fulcrum. Your device isn't just detecting the nexus, Ben. In a very real sense, it has become the nexus. The implications settled over them like a physical weight. If Valifor sought to control the convergence nexus, and the Omnitrix was now that nexus. They're coming for me, Ben stated simply. Not a question, but a recognition of the inevitable conclusion. Yes, Azazel confirmed, and not just a strike team or special forces. If my sources are correct, House Valifor is marshalling its full military might for one decisive operation. Akeno's lightning crackled around her hands reflexively. Then we prepare for war. Not just us, Ben decided, his fatigue giving way to determination. If the Omnitrix really is the convergence nexus now, this isn't just a devil problem or a sacred gear problem. It's an everything problem. He looked at each of them in turn. Akeno with her fallen angel heritage and devil allegiance, Issei with his dragon-powered sacred gear. Azazel with his ancient knowledge and scientific curiosity. Time to call in all the allies we can find, Ben concluded. From every dimension we can reach. Chapter 3. Worlds United. Dawn broke over Tokyo with bands of amber and gold stretching across a sky still dotted with stars. From the observation deck of Azazel's secondary research facility, a penthouse laboratory G. UISED is a corporate headquarters in the heart of the financial district, Ben Tennyson watched the city awaken. 24 hours had passed since the revelation that the Omnitrix had become the convergence nexus. 24 hours of frantic preparation for what everyone agreed would be a decisive confrontation. The Omnitrix pulsed against his wrist with that now familiar rhythm, though something had changed. The device felt more integrated with his own biological systems, as if the boundary between technology and wielder was thinning. Ben could sense dimensional vibrations without actively ying, subtle variations in the fabric of reality that he would have been completely oblivious to just days ago. Remarkable adaptation rate, came Azazel's voice from behind him. The fallen angel leader approached with 2 steaming cups, offering one to Ben. Most sacred gear users take years to develop the sensory awareness you've achieved in days. Ben accepted the cup, finding it contained not coffee but some herbal tea with an unfamiliar but pleasant aroma. Necessity is a good teacher, he replied simply. Any updates from our scouts? Azazel joined him at the window, his casual demeanor belying the gravity of the situation. Rias's familiar detected significant troop movements in the underworld. House Valifor is indeed mobilizing on a scale unseen since the Great War. They're being careful to mask their intentions from other devil houses, but our intelligence suggests they've developed a ritual that will allow them to capture and harness the convergence nexus. Meaning me, Ben said. The weight of being not just a target but a cosmic fulcrum settling on his shoulders once again. Meaning the Omnitrix specifically, Azazel corrected. Though separating you from it would likely prove problematic for your continued existence at this point. The implication wasn't lost on Ben. The sacred gear energy had integrated not just with the Omnitrix but with him on a fundamental level. Severing that connection forcibly would have catastrophic consequences. "How long do we have?" he asked, focusing on the practical rather than the existential. 12 hours, perhaps less, Azazel estimated. They'll strike at dusk when the boundary between dimensions naturally thins. Advantageous for large-scale transit. Ben nodded, mentally reviewing their preparations. In the main conference room one floor below, representatives from multiple factions and dimensions were finalizing defense strategies. Gwen and Kevin had established a perimeter security system incorporating both alien technology and magical wards. Rook had coordinated with Plumber headquarters, securing reinforcements without revealing the full supernatural dimensions of the threat, a delicate diplomatic balance. Most surprisingly, Rias Grimori had returned from the underworld with unexpected allies, members of rival devil houses who recognized that Valifor's ambitions threatened the fragile peace between factions. Self-interest perhaps, but valuable support nonetheless. "And the boundary stabilization array?" Ben asked, referring to the device Azazel and Rook had been constructing throughout the night. "Operational, though untested," Azazel replied. "In theory, it should prevent Valifor from forcibly extracting the Nexus properties from the Omnitrix. In practice," he shrugged expressively. "We'll find out when it counts," Ben finished. It wouldn't be the first time he'd relied on untested technology in a crisis situation. The door to the observation deck slid open as Akeno entered, her usual school uniform replaced by what appeared to be traditional shrine maiden attire modified for combat. The red and white fabric was reinforced with subtle protective enchantments, and her long black hair was tied back in its customary ponytail. "The team leaders are assembling for final briefing," she announced. "Rias asked me to find you both." Ben drained the last of his tea, setting the cup aside. To make sure everyone's on the same page." As they moved toward the door, Akeno paused, studying Ben with those penetrating violet eyes. "You seem remarkably calm for someone who's become a Dimensio. Null linchpin and the target of an interdimensional invasion." Ben offered a slight smile. "After you've saved the universe a few times, you develop a certain perspective." The quip masked a deeper truth, not that he was unafraid, but that he'd learned to function despite fear, to channel it into determination rather than paralysis. Akeno seemed to understand what remained unspoken, returning his smile with one of her own. "A perspective worth having," she acknowledged. The main conference room had been transformed into a war room, holographic displays showing strategic positions and energy readings throughout Tokyo. Around the large central table sat an unlikely alliance of beings from multiple dimensions and factions. Rias Grimori occupied what might be considered the head position, her Cr. Imson hair a stark contrast to her serious expression. Beside her sat her brother Sirzex Lucifer, one of the 4 Satan rulers of the underworld, who had arrived hours earlier with a contingent of elite devil troops. His power was palpable even when completely contained, like standing near a nuclear reactor disguised as a charming nobleman. Gwen and Kevin sat together on one side, Gwen's laptop pen to magical calculations while Kevin examined what appeared to be a modified alien weapon. Rook stood nearby, coordinating with Plumber forces via his badge. Issei and the rest of Rias's household occupied another section of the table. While representatives from Azazel's Grigori organization, other fallen angels with varying specializations, clustered together reviewing dimensional schematics. Saint surprising was the presence of Michael, leader of Heaven's angel faction, a being of such luminous presence that the room seemed brighter merely by his occupation of it. His agreement to participate had shocked everyone, though he'd made clear that his intervention was limited to containing the dimensional damage, not engaging directly in what he termed the political disputes of devils. As Ben entered with Azazel and Akeno, all eyes turned to them. There was a momentary silence as the diverse assembly regarded the human who had inadvertently become central to a cosmic crisis. "Well, Kevin," broke the silence with characteristic bluntness, "if we're all done staring at Ben like he's grown a second head, maybe we can finalize this plan." The tension broke, and Rias nodded appreciatively at Kevin before addressing the group. "As we were discussing, our intelligence confirms House Valifor will attempt a major incursion centered on this facility. Their objective is clear: to capture Ben A. and extract the Convergence Nexus properties from the Omnitrix." which would destabilize all dimensional boundaries, Sears added, his voice carrying the smooth authority of someone accustomed to command. Creating a cascading collapse that would eventually merge all realms, with House Valifor positioned to dominate the resulting chaos. The ritual they've developed requires physical proximity to the Nexus, Azazel continued. Taking his place at the table, they can't simply extract it from a distance. They need to establish a perimeter around Ben, maintain it for approximately 7 minutes while conducting the ritual, and then extract the Nexus properties through a specialized artifact. So we keep them away from Ben for at least 7 minutes, Gwen summarized. Shouldn't be too difficult with all of us here. Were it so simple, Michael spoke, his voice melodious yet somehow sorrowful. House Valifor has spent centuries preparing for this opportunity. They have weapons and artifacts designed specifically to counter each of our faction's abilities. Their leader, Lord Barbados Valifor, is one of the most ancient and powerful devils still existing. We've faced worse odds, Ben said, taking his position at the table. The key is coordination between our various teams. We all have different strengths, different ways of fighting. If we operate independently, Valifor will pick us apart one by one. Rias nodded in agreement. Ben is right. We need unified command structure and clear communication protocols. I've modified our plumber badges to function across all relevant frequency ranges, Rook announced, distributing devices to the team leaders. These will allow real-time tactical coordination regardless of dimensional interference. The briefing continued with specific assignments and positioning. The defense would be structured in concentric rings, outer perimeter forces to engage the main Valifor army, specialized strike teams to intercept any elite units that broke through, and a final inner defense around Ben himself. What about evacuation protocols? Gwen asked. If we can't hold them off, we need a fallback plan to get Ben to safety. Traditional dimensional travel won't work, Azazel cautioned. With the Omnitrix acting as the convergence nexus, any attempt to move Ben between dimensions could trigger exactly the kind of boundary collapse Valifor is seeking to control. Then we stand and fight, Ben decided. No retreats, no fallbacks. We hold this position. An admirable sentiment, Sears commented, but perhaps premature. There may be another option. He exchanged glances with Rias before continuing. Our family maintains certain ancient relics capable of creating dimensional pocket spaces, not truly separate dimensions, but folded sections of our current reality. Moving Ben into such a space wouldn't cross dimensional boundaries. A temporary solution at best, Michael cautioned. Such spaces are detectable by those with the right tools, which House Valifor likely possesses. But it could buy us time if needed, Rias pointed out. Sometimes a few extra minutes make all the difference. Ben considered this, then nodded. All right, we keep it as a contingency. But our primary strategy remains holding this position. The discussion turned to offensive capabilities. Ben would remain in reserve, conserving his strength for when it would be most needed. The Omnitrix's sacred gear integration had proven unpredictable, and unnecessary transformations risked depleting his energy prematurely. I've been working on something that might help, Gwen said, pulling up a display showing complex magical formulas. A barrier spell that could temporarily suppress the Nexus properties of the Omnitrix, making it harder for Valifor to detect and target. It won't last long against concentrated effort, but it could provide a tactical advantage. Similar principles to the boundary stabilization array, Azazel noted, examining her work with approval. Combined, they might prove quite effective. As the briefing continued, refining details and contingencies, Ben found his attention drawn to Akeno, who had been unusually quiet. She stood slightly apart from the others, her expression pensive. When the meeting adjourned for final preparations, he made his way to her side. Everything all right? She turned to him, a complexed Y of emotions flickering across her features before settling into a composed smile. Just contemplating the strange turns fate takes. A week ago, I was attending university classes and performing devil contracts. Now I'm part of an alliance between angels, devils, fallen angels, and alien technology to prevent dimensional collapse. Life does have a way of getting complicated, Ben agreed. Especially around the Omnitrix. Akeno's smile softened into something more genuine. You bear the weight remarkably well. Most would buckle under such responsibility. Ben shrugged slightly. Practice helps. And having people you trust beside you. And do you? She asked, her violet eyes studying him intently. Trust us, despite how recently we've entered your life. The question gave Ben pause. Trust. Tea had always been a complex issue for him, necessary for effective teamwork, yet tempered by years of encountering deception and betrayal. He'd learned to balance openness with caution, particularly when the stakes were high. I trust what I've seen, he answered honestly. Actions reveal more than words ever could. And so far, your actions have given me no reason to doubt you. Akeno seemed satisfied with his response. Then perhaps we have more in common than our affinity for destruction energy. She gestured toward where the others were dispersing for their final preparations. I should help Rias with the barrier enchantments. The next time we speak, it will likely be in battle. Ben nodded. Stay safe out there. You as well, Ben Tennyson, she replied. The fate of multiple dimensions rests on those shoulders, after all. As Akeno departed, Ben felt a momentary tightness in his chest. Not anxiety about the coming battle, but something else he couldn't quite name. Before he could examine the feeling further, Kevin approached, clapping him on the shoulder. Stop making eyes at the fallen angel and come check out these weapons Azazel's team provided, his friend said with typical directness. Some of this stuff makes Tekkadan gear look like toys. Ben allowed himself to be led away, focusing once more on preparations for the coming conflict. Whatever personal complications MiG-HT be developing would have to wait until after they'd saved multiple dimensions from collapse. The hours passed swiftly, filled with final adjustments to defense systems, review of communication protocols, and testing of the boundary stabilization array. As afternoon gave way to early evening, a tense readiness settled over the facility and its defenders. Ben stood in what had been designated the command center, a reinforced room at the heart of the building, surrounded by multiple layers of security both technological and magical. Gwen had completed her suppression barrier, a complex network of energy that hummed just at the edge of perception. Azazel's array pulsed with ready power, its sensors continuously monitoring dimensional stability. First perimeter reports incoming disturbances, Rook announced. Monitoring the communications network. Multiple spatial anomalies forming approximately 5 kilometers out, consistent with large-scale dimensional breach formation. Right on schedule, Azazel noted. Checking the time. Precisely sunset, when the natural boundaries between dimensions grew thinner. Ben moved to the central monitoring station, where holographic displays showed the city around them. Energy signatures were appearing throughout Tokyo, concentrated primarily around their location, but with smaller manifestations elsewhere. They're creating diversions, Sirzex observed. Attempting to split our defensive forces. Standard tactics, Ben agreed. But we anticipated this. The secondary teams know to hold position unless the diversionary breaches prove genuinely threatening. Gwen approached, her hands already glowing with mana energy. The suppression barrier is at full strength. It should mask the Nexus signature enough to buy us time. A sharp tone from the monitoring system drew everyone's attention. One of the energy signatures had spiked dramatically, a breach forming fully into a swirling portal of dark energy. From within it emerged armored figures, devils in battle gear, moving with military precision to secure a perimeter around the breach. First wave, Rias reported from her position coordinating the outer defense ring. Heavy infantry, approximately 50 units, with support elements following. Similar reports came in from other sectors as multiple breaches stabilized, disgorging Valifor forces into Tokyo. The invasion had begun in earnest. They're being cautious, Akeno observed over the communication link. Establishing footholds before committing their main force. Preparing for a sustained operation, Sirzex confirmed. They expect resistance. Ben studied the tactical display, watching as the first skirmishes began between Valifor's advance units and their outer defensive perimeter. Flashes of magical energy lit up the evening sky, visible even through the building's reinforced windows. They haven't committed their elite forces yet, he noted. They're probing our defenses, looking for weaknesses. A strategy that works well against disorganized opposition, Michael commented. Less effective against our current arrangement. As if in response to his assessment, the tactical display showed a coordinated push by Valifor forces against multiple sectors simultaneously. The outer defensive perimeter held, but the pressure was increasing. They're trying to stretch us thin, Gwen observed. Force us to reinforce weaker sections. Then hammer through wherever we seem strongest, expecting that's where you'll be, Ben. A logical approach, Rook agreed. Though one that underestimates the defensive capabilities we've established. The battle intensified as Valifor committed more forces through the breaches. Reports came in of specialized units with unusual weaponry, devices that disrupted magical barriers or nullified certain energy types. They've prepared specifically for this operation, Azazel noted, analyzing the weapon signatures. Some of these designs are ancient, artifacts from the Great War, repurposed for modern combat. A sudden alert from the monitoring system indicated a new development, a larger breach forming directly above the building, higher in the atmosphere than the others. Aerial insertion, Sears identified immediately. Elite strike team, likely targeting this facility directly. Rias, redirect aerial defense units to our position, Ben ordered through the communication network. Akeno, can you provide direct counter? Already moving, came Akeno's response, followed by visual confirmation as she took flight, wings extended and lightning gathering around her hands. She was joined by several other flying defenders, angels from Michael's contingent and specialized devil units from Sears' forces. The aerial breach expanded rapidly, and through it descended WH. It could only be described as a flying fortress, a massive structure of dark metal and glowing runic patterns, propelled by energy fields rather than physical engines. From its underside dropped small R-craft and flying devils in specialized armor. That's a Valifor war platform, Sears identified, concern evident in his voice. They haven't deployed those since the Great War. They're committing fully to this operation. Michael observed grimly. The aerial battle erupted with devastating intensity, lightning, holy fire, and demonic energy crisscrossing the darkening sky. Akeno moved with impressive speed and power, her lightning strikes taking down multiple opponents with precision and force. Ben watched the tactical display with growing concern. The Valifor forces were more numerous and better equipped than their intelligence had suggested. While their defenses were holding for now, the pressure was mounting on all fronts. We need to thin their numbers, he decided. Draw off some of their forces from the main assault. Quote, how? Kevin asked. They're pretty focused on getting to you. Exactly, Ben said, a plan forming. They're expecting me to stay here, protected at the center. If I move to another position, they'll have to split their forces to pursue. Absolutely not, Gwen countered immediately. You're the target, Ben. Putting yourself in their path is exactly what they want. Not if it's done correctly. Sears interjected, understanding Ben's strategy. A controlled movement to a secondary defensive position, properly secured and prepared, could indeed force them to divide their attention. It's too risky, Azazel cautioned. If they capture you, even briefly, we're already at risk, Ben pointed out. If we stay purely defensive, they'll eventually wear us down through attrition. We need to take the initiative. The discussion was interrupted by a massive energy surge from the war platform. A concentrated beam of darkness lanced downward, streaking the building's outer barriers with devastating force. The structure shuddered, lights flickering momentarily before stabilizing. Barrier integrity at 70% after a single strike, Rook reported. Estimated 5 more such attacks before failure. The situation was deteriorating faster than anticipated. Ben made his decision. I'm moving to secondary position Alpha, he announced. Rook, Kevin, you're with me. Gwen, maintain the suppression barrier from here. Azazel, coordinate with Rias to adjust our defensive perimeter accordingly. Despite clear reservations, no one directly countermanded his decision. In a crisis, unified leadership was essential, and Ben had proven his tactical judgment many times over. At least take a more combat-ready form, Kevin suggested as they prepared to move. Just in case. Ben nodded, activating the Omnitrix. The device pulsed with that now familiar rhythm as he selected an appropriate transformation. Diamond Head should provide both defense and offense while maintaining maneuverability. The green-purple light enveloped him, restructuring his molecular composition into the crystalline Petrosapian form. As with his previous transformations, the sacred gear energy created significant modifications, purple energy flowing through the crystal structure like internal circuitry, and crystalline formations that were sharper, more defined, ith greater complexity than standard Diamond Head. Let's move, Diamond Head said, his voice carrying additional harmonic qualities that seemed to resonate with the crystal structure of his body. They departed through a secured passage. Communications maintained via the modified plumber badges. Outside the command center, the reality of the battle became more immediate, the sounds of combat echoing through the building. Occasional impacts shaking the structure as Valifor forces hammered at their defenses. Secondary position Alpha was 3 floors down, a reinforced laboratory space that Azazel Ha. D prepared with additional protective measures, including a scaled-down version of the boundary stabilization array. It offered less protection than the command center but provided tactical advantages. In terms of movement options and alternate escape routes if needed. As they traversed the building, updates continued through the communication network. The aerial assault had intensified, with Akeno and her team fighting valiantly against superior numbers. Ground forces had breached the outer perimeter in 2 sectors, though inner defensive teams were engaging effectively. New development, came Rias's voice through the network. Large-scale portal forming on the east side. Energy signature suggests high-level presence. Barbados, Sears X identified grimly. He's arriving personally. Implication was clear. The leader of House Valifor wouldn't commit himself to the battlefield unless victory seemed assured or his personal involvement was necessary for some aspect of their plan. Amon had exchanged glances with Rook and Kevin as they reached secondary position Alpha. Looks like they're bringing out the big guns. Then so shall we, Rook replied calmly, adjusting settings on his proto-tool to maximum output. Kevin placed his hand on a metal conduit running along the wall, absorbing its properties until his body was covered in the same material. Been waiting for a proper fight anyway. Defense duty was getting boring. They had barely secured the position when the building shook more violently than before. The war platform had fired another concentrated beam, this one accompanied by some form of magical effect that partially penetrated their protective barriers. Barrier integrity at 40%, Gwen reported from the command center. They're combining technological and magical attacks now, targeting specific harmonic frequencies in our defensive matrix. Adjust the resonance patterns, Azazel instructed. Rotate through the prime sequences we established. Another impact, even stronger than the last. The lights flickered and died, emergency systems activating to provide minimal illumination. Primary power grid down, Rook reported. Switching to backup systems. Through the communication network came the sounds of intense combat, magical discharges, explosions, and the clash of weapons both physical and energy-based. East perimeter compromised, came a strained report. Barbados has breached inner defensive ring with elite guard. They're moving toward the main building. Diamond Head made a quick tactical assessment. Their plan to divide Vale Forces was working partially. Resources had been redirected to their new position, but Barbados was moving with unexpected speed and force toward their previous location. Gwen, Michael, be ready, he instructed. Barbados is likely heading for the command center first. Understood, Michael responded, his voice serene despite the chaos. We are prepared. A sudden alarm from Rook's sensor's eye indicated movement in the ventilation system. Infiltration units, he identified, proto-tool aimed at the ceiling vents. Small-scale teleportation signatures detected. The vent covers exploded outward. Rode as diminutive figures dropped into the room, not devils but some other species, with scaled skin and multiple limbs moving with insect-like precision. Each carried specialized equipment designed for breaching barriers and bypassing security systems. Astaroth clan vassals, Kevin identified, immediately engaging the nearest ones. Specialized infiltrators. They're trying to disable our defenses from inside. The skirmish was brief but intense. The infiltrators moved with surprising speed and coordination, targeting systems and structural points rather than engaging directly in combat. Diamond D had created crystal barriers to protect critical equipment while Rook and Kevin methodically neutralized the intruders. That was too easy, Diamond had noted as the last infiltrator fell. A distraction, not the main thrust. As if confirming his assessment, a massive explosion rocked the building from below, not an attack from outside, but an internal detonation. The floor trembled ominously beneath them. Structural integrity compromised on lower levels, Azazel reported. They've breached the foundation. Multiple hostile signatures moving upward through the building. The tactics became Lear, Valifor forces attacking from above with the war platform, Barbados leading a direct assault from the east, infiltrators targeting internal systems, and now a force moving up from below. A comprehensive strategy to overwhelm their defenses from multiple directions simultaneously. They knew exactly where to hit us, Kevin observed grimly. Someone provided them with detailed intelligence about our defenses. Or they've been planning this specific operation for longer than we realized, Rook suggested. House Valifor has existed for millennia, with ample time to prepare for various contingencies. The building shook again as the war platform fired another concentrated beam. Through the windows, they could see the evening sky illuminated by magical combat, Akeno and the aerial defense team still engaging Valifor's flying forces, though clearly outnumbered. Barrier integrity at 25%, Gwen reported, strain evident in her voice. One more direct hit might collapse the entire system. Diamond Head made a decision. We need to take out that war platform. As long as it's operational, we're fighting a losing battle. Agreed, Sears responded over the network. But aerial units are fully engaged just maintaining their current position. We don't have the resources to mount an offensive against the platform itself. Then I'll do it, Diamond Head decided. Kevin, Rook, maintain this position. I'm going to address our aerial problem. Ben, that's exactly what they want, Gwen protested. Drawing you out into the open. Maybe, Diamond Head acknowledged, but that platform needs to go down. And I have the means to do it. Without waiting for further debate, he moved to the window. The sacred gear energy flowing through his crystalline form responded to his intention, creating a complex configuration of crystal structures extending from his body. With a focused thought, these structures detached, forming a platform beneath his feet that he could contour. Telekinetically, an ability far beyond standard Diamond Head capabilities. Maintain communication, he instructed as the crystal platform carried him through the window and into the battle-torn sky. I'll be back before you know it. The aerial perspective provided a sobering view of the situation. Tokyo's skyline was illuminated by magical combat in multiple sectors, dimensional breaches visible. Swirling vortices of dark energy hovering at various points throughout the city. The war platform dominated the airspace above their building, its massive form bristling with weapons and surrounded by flying devils. Akeno spotted him immediately, disengaging from her current opponent to fly alongside his crystal platform. Lightning crackled around her, and despite the intensity of combat, she appeared energized rather than fatigued, in her element amid the chaos of battle. Bold move, she called to him, blasting a devil that attempted to approach. Though perhaps foolhardy, it's been said before, Diamond Head replied, manipulating his crystal platform to avoid enemy fire. That platform needs to go down. Any suggestions for its weak points? Akeno studied the massive structure as circled at a relatively safe distance. The energy projection array at its center is the primary weapon, but heavily shielded. The propulsion runes along the underside are more vulnerable, disrupt those. And the entire platform loses stability. Diamond Head nodded, formulating a plan. I'll need covering fire to get close enough. Can your team provide that? With pleasure, Akeno confirmed, already signaling to her aerial companions. On your mark. The modified Diamond Head focused, channeling the sacred gear energy that flowed through his crystalline body. He could feel the power responding. Differently than before, more attuned to his intentions, less erratic in its manifestation. Perhaps the stress of combat was accelerating his adaptation to these new abilities. Now, he signaled. Ino and her team launched a coordinated barrage against the platform's upper defenses, lightning, holy fire, and magical energy striking simultaneously from multiple angles. The platform's defensive barriers flared visibly under the assault, and its attention shifted upward. Diamond Head seized the opportunity, directing his crystal platform beneath the massive structure with surprising speed. Up close, the platform was even more imposing. Ancient runic patterns glowing with malevolent energy, weapons systems tracking and firing at the aerial defenders, the entire structure humming with power that predated modern civilization. The propulsion runes Akeno had mentioned were visible now, complex geometric patterns etched into the underside of the platform, glowing with a pulsing rhythm that Sama Al reminded Ben of the Omnitrix's current behavior. These weren't just power sources but dimensional anchors, keeping the massive structure stable in this reality. Diamond Head extended his hands, cries. Tall spikes forming and launching upward with precision. Each spike carried a payload of sacred gear energy, the destruction element amplifying their impact as they struck the runic patterns. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The runes flared with conflicting energy, their patterns disrupting as the sacred gear power interfered with their dimensional properties. The platform shuddered, listing to one side as its stability wavered. Valifor forces responded quickly, devils diving beneath the platform to engage this new threat. Diamond Head created a crystal shield around himself, deflecting magical attacks while continuing to target the propulsion runes. Akeno and several others descended to provide support, creating a perimeter around him as he worked. The central rune cluster, Akeno called out, pointing to a larger configuration at the platform's center. That's the primary stability nexus. Disrupt that, and the entire system fails. Diamond Head focused on the indicated target, channeling more power into his next attack. The crystal beneath his feet reshaped, forming a concentrated projection array that gathered both the natural properties of Petrosepian crystals and the destructive element of the sacred gear energy. With a focused thought, he released the accumulated power in a single concentrated beam. The purple-tinged crystal energy struck the central rune cluster with devastating precision, shattering the ancient patterns and disrupting the dimensional anchors that kept the massive structure aloft. The effect cascaded throughout the platform. Runes flickered and failed, energy systems overloaded, and the structural integrity began to collapse. Devils abandoned their posts, flying clear of the failing behemoth as it listed more severely. Time to go, Diamond Head announced, already directing his crystal platform away from the destabilizing war machine. Akeno and her team retreated as well, maintaining their defensive formation around him as they put distance between themselves and the collapsing platform. Behind them, with a sound like thunder magnified 1,000 times, the ancient war platform began to break apart, sections separating as dimensional and chores failed and reality reasserted its natural laws upon the massive structure. Primary target neutralized, Akeno reported through the communication network, satisfaction evident in her voice. War platform is going down. The platform's destruction created a cascade of secondary explosions, its weapons and power systems failing catastrophically. The massive structure plummeted toward Tokyo Bay, dimensional energy dissipating in spectacular visual displays as it fell. A significant blow to Valifor's assault capabilities, Sears acknowledged through the network. But Barbados has breached the building's eastern defenses. He's moving toward your previous position, Ben. And we have multiple hostiles ascending through lower levels, Azazel added. Converging on secondary position Alpha where Kevin and Rook are holding. Diamond Head assessed the situation quickly. With the aerial threat significantly reduced, his attention needed to return to the building. Akeno, can your team secure the airspace without me? Now that the platform is gone, yes, she confirmed. We'll prevent any additional aerial insertion attempts. Good. I'm returning to support Rook and Kevin. He directed his crystal platform back toward the building, aiming for the windows of secondary position Alpha. As he approached, the tactical situation became clearer. Valifor forces had indeed breached multiple sections of the building, fighting their way through the defensive teams with determination born of fanatical purpose. Barbados himself, accompanied by elite guard units, was moving methodically toward what he believed was Ben's location, the command center where Gwen, Michael, and Azazel were maintaining their defense. Diamond Head crashed through the windows of secondary position Alpha, finding Rook and Kevin engaged in intense combat with devil forces that had breached the floor from below. Crystal shards flew from his body in all directions, impaling several attackers before they could react to his arrival. Reinforcements have arrived, he announced unnecessarily, creating a crystal barrier between his friends and a particularly large attacker wielding what appeared to be a soul-draining weapon. About time, Kevin replied. His metallic form dented and scorched but still functional. These guys don't know when to quit. They're remarkably dedicated to their objective, Rook observed. His proto-tool configured as a power sword that sliced through a devil's armor with precision. The arrival of Diamond Head turned the tide of the immediate skirmish. The remaining Valifor forces in the room were quickly neutralized. Though it was clear more were on the way, the sounds of combat echoed from corridors in multiple directions. "Barbados has reached the command center," came Gwen's tense voice through the communication network. "Michael is engaging him directly while Azazel and I maintain the boundary stabilization array. We need support." The situation was deteriorating faster than anticipated. Barbados himself was clearly more powerful than their intelligence had suggested, breaking through defenses that should have held against lesser opponents. "We need to regroup," Diamondhead decided. "Rook, Kevin, head to the command center to support Gwen and the others. I'll draw Barbados away once you're in position." "How?" Kevin asked. "That guy's gunning for you specifically. He's not going to be easily distracted. He's after the Omnitrix as the convergence nexus," Diamondhead corrected. "Which means he'll follow wherever it goes. I'll lead him on a chase through the building, away from our critical systems and personnel." Rook frowned, clearly concerned with the plan. "That places you at significant risk, Ben. Barbados is an ancient devil with considerable power." "I know," Diamondhead acknowledged. "But I've faced worse, and I don't intend to fight him alone. Just keep him occupied until we can coordinate a combined response." Reluctantly, his friends agreed to the plan. As they moved to support the command center, Diamondhead established direct communication with those facing Barbados. "Michael, Gwen, Azazel, I'm going to draw Barbados away. When I give the signal, I need you to direct him toward the eastern atrium. We'll set up an ambush there." "Understood," Michael responded, his serene voice somehow carrying above the sounds of intense combat. "Though, I must warn you, Barbados wields artifacts of considerable power, including a dimension slicer of ancient design." "Noted," Diamondhead acknowledged, already moving through the building toward the command center. "Be ready on my mark." As he approached, the evidence of Barbados's power became increasingly apparent. Corridors were scorched with energy discharges, walls breached not by explosives but by pure force of will. Bodies of defenders and attackers alike lay where they had fallen, testament to the intensity of the conflict. The command center itself was a scene of devastation when Diamondhead arrived. The reinforced doors had been torn from their frames, defensive barriers shattered. Within, Michael, his angelic form now fully manifested with multiple wings of pure light, engaged in direct combat with a towering figure that could only be Barbados Valifor. The ancient devil stood nearly 9 feet tall, his form both aristocratic and monstrous simultaneously. He wore armor of a sign so old it predated human civilization, adorned with symbols that hurt the eyes to look upon directly. In one hand he held a weapon that appeared to be a cross between a scepter and a scythe, its edge somehow cutting into the fabric of reality itself with each swing. Gwen and Azazel maintained the boundary stabilization array, which pulsed with energy as it countered Barbados's attempts to disrupt the dimensional stability around them. The suppression barrier had already failed, its complex patterns shattered by the Devil Lord's power. "Barbados Valifor," Diamondhead called out, deliberately drawing attention to himself. "Looking for me?" The ancient devil turned, eyes burning with eldritch fire fixing upon the Omnitrix symbol on Diamondhead's chest. A smile that contained too many th spread across his aristocratic features. "The Nexus Bearer," he intoned, his voice resonating with power that made the air itself vibrate. "How convenient that you deliver yourself to me willingly." "Not exactly," Diamondhead countered, firing a barrage of crystal shards that Barbados deflected with casual ease. "Just thought I'd introduce myself before sending you back to whatever hell you crawled out of." The taunt had its intended effect. Barbados's expression darkened with rage, and he moved with shocking speed for his size, the dimension slicer arcing through the air toward Diamondhead. The modified Petrosapian barely avoided the strike, the weapon passing close enough that he felt reality itself distort around its edge. This was no ordinary blade, it cut through dimensions as easily as physical matter. A weapon designed specifically for operations involving dimensional boundaries. "Now," Diamondhead shouted to his allies, already retreating through the shattered doorway. Michael, understanding the strategy immediately, disengaged from direct combat and moved to support Gwen and Azazel with the boundary stabilization array. Barbados, focused entirely on the Nexus Bearer, pursued Diamondhead with single-minded determination. The chase through the building was harrowing. Diamondhead used every trick and ability at his disposal, creating crystal barriers to slow pursuit, directing through unpredictable pathways, occasionally pausing to exchange brief skirmishes that kept Barbados's rage focused squarely on him. The sacred gear energy flowing through his crystalline form responded to the danger, enhancing his natural abilities in ways that surprised even him. Crystal structures formed with greater complexity and purpose, responding to his intentions with intuitive precision. The destruction element amplified his offensive capabilities, crystal projectiles carrying disruptive energy that even Barbados was forced to actively defend against. Throughout the building, other battles continued. Valifor forces had breached multiple sections, engaging defender teams in combat throughout the structure. The communication network provided constant updates, some areas holding firm, others being overrun. Reinforcements redirecting to critical points. Eastern Atrium secure, came Kevin's voice eventually. Ambush team in position. The Eastern Atrium was a large open space originally designed for presentations and gatherings. Its high ceiling and multiple entry points made it ideal for their purpose, a location where multiple allies could converge from different directions, surrounding a central target. Diamond Head altered his course, leading Barbados toward the prepared location. The ancient Devil Lord pursued relentlessly, occasionally unleashing blasts of concentrated demonic energy that tore through walls and floors with destructive force. "You cannot escape, Nexus Bearer," Barbados called, his voice echoing through the corridors. "The convergence will be mine to command, as was prophesied eons ago." "You talk too much," Diamond Head replied over his shoulder, firing another barrage of crystal shards to maintain the devil's attention. "Has anyone ever told you that?" As they approached the Eastern Atrium, Diamond Head activated the full team communication channel. "Target approaching Eastern Atrium from Northwest Corridor. All teams prepare for coordinated engagement." He burst through the doorway into the open space, crystal platform forming beneath his feet to carry him to the center of the room. Barbados followed moments later, pausing at T. He threshold as his ancient eyes narrowed with suspicion. "A trap," he observed, surveying the seemingly empty atrium. "How predictable." "Actually," came Rias's voice as she stepped from concealment. Crimson energy swirling around her hands, "we prefer to call it a tactical reassessment." From multiple entry points, defenders emerged simultaneously, Kevin and Rook from one direction, Akeno descending from above. Issei and Kaneko appearing from behind decorative pillars, and Searsek stepping through a teleportation circle that formed directly behind Barbados. The ancient Devil Lord assessed TH's situation with the calculated precision of a being who had survived countless battles across millennia. His eyes narrowed, but rather than anger, his expression showed something closer to appreciation. "Impressive coordination," he acknowledged, "but ultimately futile." With a gesture of his free hand, he activated something on his armor, runic patterns flaring to life with malevolent energy. The air around him distorted, and from nowhere materialized a dozen elite guard devils, each bearing weapons and armor of ancient design. "I did not survive the Great War by failing to anticipate such tactics," Barbados stated calmly. "Now, shall we dispense with these games? The Convergence Nexus calls to me, and I to it." The battle erupted with devastating force, magical energy, physical combat, and D-dimensional powers all clashing in the confined space of the atrium. Diamond Head found himself engaging directly with Barbados while the others handled his elite guard. The ancient devil's skill with the Dimension Slicer was terrifying to behold. Each swing tore rifts in reality itself, creating momentary tears that exposed glimpses of other dimensions. Diamond Head countered with increasingly complex crystal structures, the sacred gear energy allowing him to create barriers that partially resisted even dimensional cutting. Around them, their allies fought with equal intensity. Akeno's light ing carved through the air with precision, striking down devils with devastating effect. Kevin and Rook operated as a seamless team, covering each other's vulnerabilities while pressing their advantages. Rias and Searsek demonstrated why the Grimoire House commanded such respect, their power coordinately devastating even against elite opponents. Yet despite their combined efforts, Barbados remained formidable. His ancient power seemed to grow rather than diminish as the battle progressed, drawing strength from the dimensional distortions his weapon created. "You fight well, Nexus Bearer," he acknowledged during a momentary pause in their exchange. But surely you must sense the inevitability of this outcome. The convergence is destined to be unified once more, the boundaries between worlds dissolved. Maybe, Diamond Head conceded, creating a new crystal formation to replace one Barbados had shattered. But not by you, and not today. The Devil Lord laughed, a sound that carried both genuine amusement and ancient malice. Your determination is admirable. It will make absorbing your essence along with the Nexus all the more satisfying. The battle resumed with increased intensity. Barbados pressed forward, his attacks growing more precise as he identified patterns in Diamond Head's defenses. The Dimension Slicer came dangerously close to the Omnitrix symbol on several occasions, each near miss sending discordant vibrations through Ben's transformed body. We need to end this quickly, Sears called out, having dispatched several elite guards only to find more appearing through Barbados's dimensional distortions. His connection to the Valifor dimensional anchors grows stronger the longer this continues. Diamond Head understood the warning. Barbados wasn't simply fighting them, he was establishing a connection to the network of dimensional breaches throughout Tokyo, drawing power from them to fuel his efforts here. We need to disrupt his connection to those anchors, Diamond Head called back. Cut him off from his power source. The Dimension Slicer is the focal point. Azazel responded through the communication network from the command center, where he was monitoring the dimensional energy patterns. It's not just a weapon, it's a control mechanism for their entire operation. That information provided the strategic insight they needed. Diamond Head relayed a quick plan through the team network, and their approach shifted accordingly. Rather than trying to defeat Barbados directly, they would focus on separating him from the Dimension Slicer. Akeno and Ria's coordinated lightning and destruction energy to target the weapon specifically. Kevin and Rook maneuvered to flank Barbados, looking for opportunities to disrupt his grip. Sears prepared a specialized binding spell designed to isolate dimensional artifacts. Diamond Head's role was perhaps the most dangerous, to keep Barbados's attention fixed primarily on him, ensuring the ancient devil wouldn't recognize their true strategy until too late. Your allies grow desperate, Barbados observed as their tactics shifted, resorting to uncoordinated strikes now. I expected better strategic thinking from the legendary Ben Tennyson. Maybe I'm just full of surprises, Diamond Head replied, launching a complex attack pattern that seemed random but was precisely calculated to draw Barbados's weapon into a specific position. The moment came when Barbados raised the Dimension Slicer to counter a particularly aggressive crystal barrage. In that instant of exposed vulnerability, multiple attacks converged simultaneously, Akeno's lightning striking the weapon's haft, Rias's destruction energy hitting Barbados's armored wrist, Kevin and Rook targeting his legs to disrupt his balance, and Sears activating the binding spell with perfect timing. The combined assault achieved what no individual attack could have. For a crucial moment, Barbados's grip on the Dimension Slicer loosened. Diamond Head seized the opportunity, a precisely formed crystal projectile striking the weapon itself, knocking it from the ancient devil's grasp. The Dimension Slicer spun through the air, its edge cutting a swirling pattern of dimensional distortions as it tumbled. Before Barbados could reclaim it, Issei lunged forward, his sacred gear enhanced reflexes allowing him to catch the weapon by its non-bladed section. Got it, he called out, immediately retreating with his prize. Barbados's expression transformed from confident control to genuine alarm. No, return that immediately, you insignificant. He never completed the thought. With the connection to his dimensional anchors severed, the ancient devil's power diminished noticeably. Sears and Rias capitalized on the moment, unleashing a coordinated binding spell that enveloped Barbados in crimson energy, restraining his movement. The weapon is secured, Issei reported, having retreated to a defensive position where Kaneko stood guard. What now? Azazel's voice came through the communication network, urgent and focused. Use it to close the breaches. The slicer can seal what it has opened if the command patterns are reversed. Diamond Head approached Issei, studying the ancient weapon. The Dimension Slicer pulsed with power that resonated oddly with the Omnitrix's energy signature, as if the two artifacts recognized something in each other. I think I can reconfigure it, he said, reaching out with crystal-covered hands that now glowed with sacred gear energy. The boundary transgressor in the Omnitrix should allow me to interface with its control mechanisms. As his hands made contact with the weapon, the expected interface occurred, but with unexpected intensity. The Omnitrix symbol on his chest flared brilliantly, purple energy, surging through his crystalline form and into the dimension slicer. The weapon responded, its runic patterns shifting and realigning as the sacred gear energy imposed new configurations. Barbados, Street, ill-restrained by the Grimoire siblings, binding spell, watched with undisguised horror. Stop. You don't understand what you're doing. The dimensional matrix cannot be reconfigured without proper calibration. Actually, Diamondhead replied, continuing the process as the slicer's patterns stabilized into a new configuration. I think that's exactly what we're doing. With the reconfiguration complete, the dimension slicer pulsed with energy that now matched the rhythm of the Omnitrix, the two artifacts synchronized to a common purpose. All teams, Diamondhead announced through the communication network. We're about to close all dimensional breaches simultaneously. Secure your positions and prepare for potential energy discharge. Raising the reconfigured slicer, he channeled the sacred G-ear energy through both his transformed body and the ancient artifact. The Omnitrix symbol pulsed in perfect harmony with the weapon, and reality itself seemed to bend around them as dimensional forces responded to their combined influence. With a single, decisive motion, Diamondhead activated the slicer's primary function, but now reversed to close rather than cut. The effect rippled outward from their position, spreading throughout Tokyo and beyond, reaching every breach Valifor had created. Through the monitoring systems still functioning in the command center, they watched as breach after breach collapsed, not chaotically, but in controlled sequences that sealed the dimensional tiers without destabilizing the boundaries further. Valifor forces found themselves cut off from reinforcement and retreat simultaneously, their coordinated assault transforming into isolated pockets of increasingly desperate resistance. Barbados howled with rage and frustration as his grand design collapsed before his eyes. Millennia of preparation, the prophecies of the convergence. You cannot stop what has been foretold since the dawn of creation itself. Maybe not, Diamondhead acknowledged, lowering the now dormant slicer as the last breach is closed. But we can certainly reschedule it. With their dimensional advantages neutralized, the remaining Valifor forces were quickly contained. Barbados himself, stripped of his connection to the dimensional anchors and separated from his primary weapon, was bound with multiple layers of restraint, technological, magical, and dimensional. The underworld LD authorities will handle his imprisonment, Searsex stated as specialized devil enforcers took custody of the ancient lord. There are protocols for containing beings of his power level that date back to the Great War. And his forces? Ben asked, having reverted to human form as the immediate threat subsided. Those who surrender will be processed according to devil law, Rias explained. Those who continue to resist. She left the implication hanging, though her expression suggested mercy wasn't the primary consideration. As the cleanup operations began, Ben found himself on the building's roof, surveying the Tokyo skyline now returning to its normal nighttime illumination. The dimensional distortions had faded, reality reasserting its proper configuration throughout the city. Gensi services were addressing the collateral damage from the battle, though thankfully the conflict had remained largely invisible to most human observers, supernatural forces on all sides having contained the visible effects to protect ordinary citizens. The Omnitrix had returned to its steady pulsing rhythm, though somehow it felt different, more integrated, more harmonized with both his biologic systems and the dimensional fabric around them. The sacred gear energy had found its balance within the alien device, no longer fluctuating erratically but maintaining a stable presence. Admiring your handiwork, came Akeno's voice as she joined him on the roof, her combat attire somewhat tattered but her composure intact. Ben smiled slightly, just thinking about how strange this week has been, even by my standards. I imagine your standards for strangeness are rather high, she replied, moving to stand beside him at the rooftop's edge. They adjust over time, he acknowledged. Aliens, time travel, parallel dimensions. After a while, you develop a certain perspective. And now devils, angels, and sacred gears to add to your collection of experiences, Akeno noted, a hint of amusement in her voice. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the cool night breeze carrying the distant sounds of the city recovering from an invasion most of its inhabitants never knew occurred. What happens now? Ben finally asked. With the Omnitrix as the convergence nexus, Azazel and your cousin have some theories, Akeno replied. The integration appears to have stabilized. The sacred gear energy has found its equilibrium within the Omnitrix, neither dominating nor being subsumed by the alien technology. Meaning you remain the focal point where dimensions connect, but in a controlled, stable manner. The boundary transgressor's purpose is being fulfilled, maintaining healthy boundaries between worlds while allowing controlled interaction. Ben considered this. So I am permanently the dimensional linchpin now. Akeno turned to face him directly, her violet eyes reflecting the city lights below. Is that so different from what you were before? You've always stood at the intersection of worlds, human and alien, Earth and the broader universe. This is simply another aspect of the role you've chosen. Her perspective struck him as insightful. Throughout his hero career, Ben had indeed operated at the boundaries between worlds, serving as Earth's primary defender against cosmic threats while simultaneously representing humanity to the wider galactic community. Omnitrix becoming the convergence nexus seemed less like a fundamental change and more like a natural evolution of his existing purpose. I suppose you're right, he acknowledged. Though it does add some complications to an already complicated life. The most worthwhile things usually do, Akeno replied with a gentle smile. And you won't face those complications alone. This crisis has formed connections that transcend dimensional boundaries, alliances and friendships that will endure. As if emphasizing her point, the rooftop door opened to reveal Gwen, Kevin, and Rook, accompanied by Rias, Issei, and several others from both their teams. They approached with expressions of shared accomplishment, the unique camaraderie that comes from facing extraordinary dangers together. The final breach signatures have dissipated, Gwen reported. Dimensional stability has returned to normal parameters. And Barbados is secured, Rias added. My brother is personally overseeing his transport to the maximum security level of Cocytus prison in the underworld. Kevin, characteristically direct, cut to a more immediate concern. So are we celebrating or what? I figure saving multiple dimensions from collapse deserves at least dinner and drinks. The suggestion broke the remaining tension, laughter rippling through the assembled group. Plans quickly formed for a more relaxed gathering, a CE to decompress after the intensity of battle and to solidify the bonds formed through shared danger. As they moved toward the door, Akeno touched Ben's arm lightly, holding him back for a moment as the others proceeded inside. Before we join them, she said, her expression more serious, there's something you should know. The connection between our dimensions will likely continue to strengthen due to the Omnitrix's new status. You may find yourself drawn into supernatural matters with increasing frequency. Somehow that doesn't surprise me, Ben replied with resigned amusement. The Omnitrix has never been one to keep things simple. It means our paths will likely cross again, Akeno continued, a hint of something more personal entering her tone. Perhaps with some regularity. I think I could get used to that, Ben said, holding her gaze. The connection between them had developed rapidly but genuinely, forged through shared danger and mutual respect, but evolving into something with potential for more. Akeno's smile deepened, a warmth in her violet eyes that had nothing to do with her combat abilities. As could I, Ben Tennyson. As could I. Together they rejoined the others, moving into a future neither had anticipated days earlier, a future where the boundaries between dimensions remained intact but permeable, where new alliances bridged ancient divides, and where a human hero bearing both alien technology and divine power stood at the convergence point of countless worlds. The Omnitrix pulsed steadily against Ben's wrist, its rhythm now harmonized with the cosmic patterns that maintained the multiverse itself. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would be faced with the same determination and adaptability that had defined his hero career from the beginning. After all, as both Ben Tennyson and the beings from beyond the dimensional veil had learned through their unexpected alliance, when worlds converge, possibilities expand, and heroes rise to meet them. _____. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.